Okay, so quick introduction overview just of who, when we're talking about the master teacher, who we're talking about. And when we say master teacher, in the context of how we use it, it's a case of it's being is saying they are master at teaching, per se, the attribute of teaching. And you're not going to know that or really be able to embrace that title unless you, I suppose, put the individual to the test, you understand, by taking books apart, lectures, etc., and really putting it to the test as you as an individual in terms of your research, etc., understand, in the context of being teaching or knowledge, etc., coming from our perspective, you understand, Negroid, African perspective, understood, which the world, as I say, seemingly knows that we were the first people, not in an egotistical way, just dealing with simple facts, yet does not seek out our perspective on many issues, particularly in the understanding of life itself, existence, the environment we're in, our true purpose, so on and so forth. Some of the sort of key, as they would call it, I suppose, philosophical questions that maybe human beings have, the kind of how, who, what, where, why, how, you understand, when, that type of thing, understood. Well, the world really is dominated certainly by a Western European perspective, understand, in that regard. And as I say, when you look at the, I suppose, the order of the races in terms of how they've come along in that regard, then they came along last. So really and truly, not to say that we haven't had technological advancements in the last 6,000 years, and more acutely in the last 100, 150 years, exponentially, but that's necessarily not been from Caucasians per se, but for those that really understand that really extraterrestrial intervention, do you understand, which has upgraded human beings significantly, say in the last certainly 100 years, from 20th into the 21st century. We've seen a major shift, technological advancement, and that's because of, like, extraterrestrial involvement and intervention, more so, as I say, from 1945 onwards. Now, as I say, Dr. Malachi KZ York, also known to us as Nabab Yaanuwn, as the teacher, and born in Takoradi, Ghana, West Africa, June 26, 1945, to Mary Abba Akran York and Al-Hadi Abdur Rahman Al-Mahdi. So his Ghanaian side, I'm talking about genetics or genes, is from his mother's side of the family. Understand? And so we, as Sabians, as most ancient African doctrines, are matriarchal in terms of how we're framed, you understand? And that's based on, as I say, the alignment with natural nature, you understand? So woman is first, so to speak, and gave birth to males, but even the structure and format of how the how existence is formulated. Wu-Sabat, in fact, as a spiritual science of Negroids dealing with factual information, is feminine in origin in terms of the word structure. So it really ties into Sabat or Sabatat, some say, Sirius star constellation, as I say, the bridge between the 18th and 19th galaxies. You understand? So that star system is associated with feminine or female. So even outside of the planet, going into the planet, we are matriarchal. It's mother first, so to speak, or M other, and M representing, excuse me, the sort of perfect, well, M as 1,000 representing a perfect number in our culture. Now, so to say, his mother, Mary Abba Akran York, arguably one of the most important women in the last 6,000 years, in giving birth to Dr. Malachi KZ York and bringing forth or allowing the restoration and renewal of our story by giving our people that spiritual science. Each of the different races has their spiritual science, various different guises, interpreted or called religion today, understood. Wu-Sabat is the spiritual science and a way of life, as I say, connecting us into natural nature and allowing smooth and proper, uninterrupted connection to our ancestors, so both physical and etheric. Yeah, so as we've shown before, this lotus flower, or the Faf symbol for the lotus flower, associated with the female, and a symbol of regeneration. And so, which the woman exemplifies through her menstrual cycle. Her body is cycling, rejuvenating, generating itself, as all human beings do. And so the body is continuously rebuilding itself. But the menstrual cycle, now played, is that made evil in religion today, don't understand. It's like it is cycling, renewing, and rejuvenating the woman's body. Also, more importantly, still tied in to natural nature, because that cycle is driven by way of the cosmos, because it's affected by the 4 phases of the moon. Yes. His father and sacred masculine, Al-Hadi Abdul Rahman al-Mahdi, against the Sudanese side of the family, and tied into a great family, the same family here, name, I should say, in terms of the sort of sacred masculine lineage, although, as I say, the genes are not passed from father to father in the same way they are from father to son, in the same way they are from mother to daughter. Yeah. However, great lineage. Unfortunately, I say this individual was assassinated in 1970, and so the Master Teacher did not have his father in his life for that reason, from 1970 onwards. But say ties into a great family. This person known as the Mahdi to the world, but not accepted maybe in that context because he has dark skin. His freckles were too close. In terms of a black man, the Fuzzy Wuzzy tribe, the Dongolawi tribe, as I say, hired by the Sudanese, who drove the British and Turks out of Africa. And as I say, this is the Master Teacher, age 25, where he talks about being in-housed or incarnated by a whole light being, who today is referred to as Nabab, Yaanuwn. Sounds crazy, etc. But you have to understand, in our ancient culture, as we said this many, many times in this class before, we don't dig bones up off the ground in terms of archaeology or paleontology to find out who our ancestors were. Do you understand? We do in the outformational context. So the science of Wu-Sabat, what some referred to it as previously, science of Wu-Sabat deals with the transformation, do you understand, or enables the transformation of information into outformation. Understood? And by way of the Master Teacher, or by way of your ancestors, who the Egyptians referred to as the Natharu, overseers, shown with the hieroglyphic symbol of 3 flags. Understand? The information is coming down, so by teaching us as their descendants, understand, the outformation has to be converted into information. We deal with outformation to things outside of the planet Earth, and we know that information affects our formation, it affects the structure of our being. You understand? So our endocrinal glandular system, understood, is continually taking in outformation, so energy from outside, and converting it into a form that the human body can use in various different clever ways. Understood? And in a similar context, yes, us in the planetary sense, we are receiving outformation, or taking that outformation into us in the form of information. So every 24, some say 25,000 years, they're rounding it up, our story has to be renewed. So our ancestors are using a vehicle, mechanism, or a vessel, understand, in which that being was referred to as Tahuti. The proper title, now we're coming back into the knowledge of who and what we are, is Amun, Nabab, Raye, Akhta. Understood? Yeah, so a vehicle or vessel, the soul of our ancestors coming through, taking through a vehicle or vessel to convey information to us. So why are we saying outformation? Because that's coming out from our ancestors now needs to be converted into a form that we can, for the level that we're at, understood. And then Wu-Sabat is a science of transforming information into outformation. Information, when it's really speaking about that in that context, it's talking about us. We are information. We are the Garu, or the descendants, children of these Nathara or overseers, who are in or have been caught in a certain formation. And by way of this spell cast on our people, the first aspect of it was amnesia. So forgotten our link, forgotten who we are, forgotten many aspects of it, all aspects of our culture, and wiped from our memory. Yes, and therefore the second aspect of the spell of religion, is that where we looked outside of ourselves for answers. You understand? And primarily the extreme of that is looking up for the supreme or the divine, etc. When in actuality, then other races interpret that as simply being with the sun and might think millions of miles away. And then the third aspect of that spell is the spell of money, love of the money. To understand, people putting that, I suppose, over esoteric or spiritual development. Understand? So in this context, what the teacher has to then convert that, or was programmed, being was programmed to in-house a vehicle or vessel for our ancestors to teach us, and then us now have to be transformed from mortals back into deities. You understand? And realign ourselves, as I say, with that spiritual side. Just to unify mentally first, so clean us up mentally first, and then the physical unity then follow thereafter. And all of the different races, whether they're, despite the many thousands, I suppose, of sects which are even in various different religions all over the world today, many are able to unify racially under a similar religious ideology or differences. And between that, they're able to unify on that basis. And the problem with us is that our genes have been scrambled, scattered, messed around, played with. But more importantly, our mental has been messed around with because, as I say, we have different religious ideologies, and as I say, it forces us to argue, you understand, conflict, understand, show a level of aggression towards each other. All of it, which is anti-unity, and anti-unity is also anti-blackness. You understand? Because if you look at the blackness of the universe, do you understand, or space, as you would call it today, where's the separation? You can't see where it starts and ends. Yeah, it's basically there, and it's a backdrop to everything we know that we consider to be whatever existence, real, physical, so on and so forth. Do you understand? So existence, that blackness is unified, that ultimate unity. And the absence of chaos, the supreme balancement. That is what it represents. So physically, in our optimum mental state, optimum physical state, in our optimum environment, then we should be displaying those characteristics of a unified people, with a unified mind. Personalities, characteristics are all pulling primarily in the same direction of growth, transformation. Do you understand? Which is our core purpose, to realign ourselves with the original ways of the universe we're in and beyond. So various iterations, I won't go through them in some detail. We've covered this in a lot in the previous classes. Check out our YouTube channel, All Eyes on Egypt, Midlands and the North. We've got all the previous 12 versions of this class, and we go into the subject discussed in a bit more detail. So I'm pressing on because I've got a lot of things to cover. In that regard. But if you do want more information, ask in the chat detail or check out the previous classes. So I'm going to get into where we were before. Just bear with me. Journey. Any questions? Check. Chat. No questions thus far. Don't be shy. Feel free to ask if you know about what scroll through. So if you're a bit sick, just turn your eyes to for those just joining us for the first time, you can see how many topics we've covered in this class over the last 13 parts. Or 12, should say. Okay, so we were talking a little bit about genetics and, talking about genetics and genes, and primarily in the previous classes, we do with the science of relationships. I think we'd already well established how we had built, or understanding what came before what people would describe maybe as creation. What was the very origin, the start of things, sort of making that, I think, as clear as it can be in what feels like probably a complex subject matter. But this idea, as I say, that we've been taught that we were men and women, and in actuality, I think we had proved, at least in our doctrine, that we were not men and women. We were supreme beings. Man is one step, or certainly mankind is two steps above beast. You understand? So in that context, and we are supreme, you understand, but individually supreme beings. You understand? So supreme beings is the active part of that. You understand? All being a reflection of a mental expression from the starting point of us in the world of things. Do you understand? As in the darkness, before things manifest themselves into the light, we start off as things. You understand? Supreme beings, and go through a journey within existence of being, becoming, became. Yeah, the rules of existence. All of this being an expression of the individual, as you would describe it, as your mind. Understand? But mind, if you replace the D at the end of the word E to say mine, is the your individual portion of the mental reservoir. In previous classes, we had shown you how that was being projected down, understood, from a central source, and on the fourth plane of existence, the mental, that is being interpreted as the soul. Understand? And what we expressed to you, this soul, which enables us to live at least past what described as the physical death, understood, understand, is obviously representative of that, because a person's soul can be cut off, you understand, and it can be restored again, showing that it's a connection. Do you understand? Much like people have an internet connection and listening to us today in this class over the ethers, in a live context. Do you understand? That connection can be stopped and it can be restored again. And we explained to you the connection between, obviously, the soul in housing a physical body, and if you are not in control of your decision making, so if you are a drug addict, or so therefore you're not making decisions for yourself, your decisions are being made to fulfill your addiction, for example, you lose that connection. Do you understand? So it's one of the things that would cut that connection. Can it be restored? Yes, when the restoration or the alignment that the person is making the decisions once again for themselves within the physical body, linked to, as I say, this mental reservoir of outformation coming to us in the form of information, and all that's in proper alignment. Yeah, person's soul is restored. So you can see in the context of Negroid, Nagaru, you understand, black people, for example, if you understand, under this spell, particularly enhanced, where we were kidnapped out of Africa in various different guises, obviously 400 years more acutely, people describe as, but then even insofar as coming over in circumstances less dramatic, migrating to support, for example, infrastructure building here in the UK, for example, where blacks from the Caribbean and Africa were so seemingly invited over, but when we came over here, experienced hatred in the form of racism. Even though we came back to build what were asked to come here at the Commonwealth to rebuild country transport system after World War II. Understood. That led to, as I say, this kind of hybrid creation of a person who thinks like a white Westerner, do you understand, or the Mukasu, but looks like the descendants of those, the ancient Egyptians. And so, as they call it, imposter syndrome and other names they use today, you can see why in the context of that. So for survival purposes, we have integrated and become other than who we are, become more white, if you want to say that, in order to survive. You understand? That was a necessary thing, not only from context, I suppose, of enslaved or kidnapped, proper terminology, to where we are even today, where we've migrated maybe as immigrants, and in order to fit in, so to speak, then you've adopted the culture and the ways of the sort of dominant people in a particular area, or those who have the power at least in that particular area, and so therefore you've changed. You understand, for economic and other survival. Yeah, so all of that to say that it then now creates a problem for your spiritual and esoteric development. It kills your soul. You understand, if you're not being who you are supposed to be. And in this context. So why this symbol is particularly important? Well, one is because, as you can see here described, this verse from Natural Evil Energy, or as we refer to it as, is because how it was used to explain the hidden powers of the visible yet invisible bara space. Yeah, so you're seeing a symbol that represents that which you at least can't see. And so in the context of science, they're referring to that as, they put the word dark in front of it, don't they? Yes, they say dark matter, dark energy. So this world, you understand, of things, which you refer to as nothing, but it's not nothing as in non-existing. It's nothing as in the particles are so small, understood, that they can't be detected by modern day instrumentation, in terms of things or molecules having an atomic or an atomic weight, so to speak, and so that makes it detectable by modern day instrumentation. But there's a whole world of energy, yes, of different types, and that sits there, particles, a world of things, which is where we originate from. So we were expressing that, and these symbols, as I say, give us insight or inner sight into what is taking place in the world that we don't see, but yet is the majority of existence that we do see. And somehow our minds have been fooled into thinking that the light is where it's at. And enlightenment is where it's at, and not endarkenment. Endarkenment, or getting back into the darkness, as I say, it's where it's at. And then bad information, as I say, is created poor concepts of understanding of existence. So when a person has an idea, for example, this concept of a light bulb moment, yes, understood, creates this kind of illusion that light or fire is where it's at, as opposed to the darkness. There's no light in your head, there's darkness. And there are particles, energy moving within your brain, etc., which is not visible necessarily to you, but it's there, it exists, it has a function. And without it, as I say, without these many different transactions and functions going on every waking moment of our existence, we wouldn't be able to function. Do you understand? So the world likes to keep us focused on the areas that we can see with our eyes. You understand? In the light, in the which we refer to as the chaos. You understand? As opposed to the cause that cause and effect. You understand? Which is what we're really seeking to understand. Now, all of that was to say, effectively, and what we sort of took you through, was that there was a correlation between the world of things and the world of some things, and same way there's a correlation between, as I say, the sun that we see 93 million miles away in space in the context of our sun and the many different stars, and the fact that we as human beings have a central sun referred to as a solar plexus. Understood. So the planet itself has many correlations. So the design is replicating itself in the darkness and then manifesting itself in the light. And we as Nagaru or Negroids here in the physical, understand, span the whole of that development spectrum, you understand, which is referred to as 9 ether, understood, in the different planes of existence, and we span the whole of it. And we have supreme melanin, yeah, when it's operating correctly, and it enables us to vibrate across the whole of the electromagnetic spectrum and beyond, because our origin is from the very, very source of things. Understand? Yeah, our origin is from that. There is no existence where we did not exist in some form or shape of energy, understand, which is to say, in the expression of the mental from stillness, understand, or motion, excuse me, out of stillness, yeah, we retain that as one of those endpoints, yeah, of being a part of Papa, or the all and part of existence as things, understand, and we are the perception of Papa Ut, ability to, understand, look outwardly, study itself inwardly. And so in the same way a human being, for example, can take a microscope, for example, and put one of their cells underneath the microscope and study themselves under a microscope. Do you understand? So you as a human being can study yourself outside of your own body and get a perspective of whatever, inner workings, etc. Then in a similar way, as individuals, there's no outside of Pa'ut, in a sense, or no outside of existence, no outside of all per se, but we as individuals, or the smaller pieces of the mind, as I say, being broken down in this way, in this regard, allows, as I say, or is one of the mechanisms that allows all to perceive itself through our eyes and our experiences, and so on and so forth. So we are a part of it, rendering us, as I say, supreme in that regard. So all of that was to break down, as I say, various different the correlation, and how that correlation in that development of mental is split out into male and female. So this is how we ended up with the science of relationships as opposed to talking about the art. And then last time we were on, going through, speaking to you about the influence of genetics and genes, understand? And how you're made up of 4 generational ancestral system, you understand? And how the different races, as I say, have unique characteristics placed in there by their designers or creators within their genetics, within their genes. And when we as human beings start to interact with each other in terms of exchanging of fluids, it can, as I say, inadvertently, as I say, influence not only us physically, but the way we think. Yes, and so we were going through that in some detail about, I say, how partners, when you kiss somebody, for example, the genetic kiss doctrine, how, as I say, that can alter you as a being if you don't understand what's going on. Understand? And this is one of the aspects of the spell: spiritual ignorance and racial blindness. Understand? Because spiritual ignorance is not understanding in one context how, when you mix with another human being, and then probably more extreme when the person is of a different race to you, because you're now introducing conflicts or oppositions that you may not be familiar with that are taking place within inside your own body. But the fact that you have mixed with a person who's not part of your natural system, then it can alter you, as I say, genetically, and change your behavior. If we're not aware of these things, then, as I say, we're thinking all thoughts in our head are our thoughts, not thinking that, yes, some may be our thoughts, others are a conduit in that regard, internally from our own ancestors and their experience in our own bloodstream, but also, as I say, we've got external factors, as you know, frequencies in the atmosphere, advertising, so on and so forth. All these things are flying around in these sort of city environments that many of ourselves find ourselves in. And all these are influencing factors, you understand? So they can change our fate if we're not in control, or as much control as what we should be. Now, almost where we need to be. Let's see. So I think we finished this slide, yeah. Yeah, I think it was about here the last time. So we wanted to explore incarnation challenges. Yeah, so what does that mean? Well, what it's saying is you're a vehicle or a vessel, aren't you? So your soul is not your body. You understand? And your mind is not your body. So to help us out, I suppose the master teaches to break down the different aspects of our body. So most talk about body, soul, and spirit. You understand? In this context. But we break down our body into 9 different principles. And primarily the reason for that is because they're all powered differently. So, for example, your physical body, let's say, for example, requires food, it requires sustenance, things of that nature. But let's say the chach, you understand, or excuse me, the akal aspect of you, let's just like that one. So the mental aspect of you is not powered by food in that regard. You understand? It's going to be powered or enhanced by, let's say, you align yourself or taking in the right type of information, because that helps to strengthen the existing connection that's already there. That connection gets muddied, it gets distorted, like a radio station. So imagine Wu-Sabat is broadcasting on a frequency range, and then if there was nothing negative that happened, let's say, or nothing adverse that was taking place, when you're born into this world, all those frequencies and the attachments and the connections, if you've had a relatively perfect birth, do you understand, or optimum birth, those connections are going to be intact. When you're in an environment that's not conducive to facilitating that, then effectively it's introducing white noise into that connection. Like a radio station, you get into that white noise into that connection. And so clearly when you read the right type of information, you understand, it's keeping you in a certain formation. So, and you're doing the right type of spiritual practices, which all of it, whether it's diet, whether it's chanting, things of that nature, all of it is a form of positive thinking. You understand? So when you understand that, you see that the connection, or my connection to my mental reservoir, vibrating with only my ancestral line, is going to be strengthened as a result of that. Do you understand? And obviously where we've been away from it, you understand, and had a lot of white noise, as we then realign ourselves back with our culture again, we get taught the right type of information from our perspective by one of our incarnated masters who understands where they are and where we are not. Do you understand? And how to thread that connection back together again. Then our connection is strengthened. So as you read or you re-add the information which has been lost, yes, you dissipate ignorance, which means to ignore the facts, and then you strengthen your connection. Do you understand? And so you're seeing things a bit different. You understand? And you cannot underestimate the importance of information and how it shapes your perspective and how you see the world. Because remember, you're not really looking outwardly. And when you use your eyes to see things, you are looking inwardly, because you're looking at a reflection of light back into the brain. Yeah, the image shown upside down or displays upside down on your retina, and based on the information in your brain, understood, you then flip it the right way up, as we would describe it as, and you interpret what you see. You understand? So, and information affects that interpretation. So if somebody might sit and say, look at a set of blue eyes, for example, it's nothing to do with negative racial descriptions here. No one wins the race in racism, but we're going to talk truth in this context. Somebody might look at a set of blue eyes and think, well, those blue eyes are much more beautiful than brown eyes. Yes? But yet, if you understand genetics, for example, depending on the information, so you're looking at aesthetic and say, oh, well, they're beautiful. Now, you've not analyzed where your definition of beauty came from. But if I dispassionately looked at the human race and I was analyzing it from a genetic point of view, I would look at blue eyes as genetically weak and inferior. That's why they're showing us blue, because there's no color, in the iris, versus brown, which is stronger genetically, dominant genetically versus recessive traits. Do you understand? So with that knowledge in mind, for example, I wouldn't look at, I might see the beauty of blue eyes, let's say, but I wouldn't look at it as more beautiful than brown eyes, because I'm going to look and say, well, that's weak. You understand? That's inferior versus something that's superior, or to use a proper terminology that they use, recessive versus dominant. Do you understand? So, if you see somebody and they appear, let's say, on the outside externally sick, you're probably going to be less attracted to that look than you are if somebody's healthy and more dominant. Do you understand what I'm saying? Now, somebody's messed through television with our perception of how we look at these things. So, as we've expressed in these classes before, many times, is that what is genetically inferior in human beings is what is considered to be the standard of ultimate beauty in the society. So size 0, straight fur, that they refer to wrongly as hair. You understand? The more lighter the eyes, do you understand? The more thinner the lips, thinner the nose and the nostrils. So all of these things, which are, if we're looking at the human race, you understand, would more be at the weaker end, recessive end of genetics of us as a human race, and the more dominant features. So the curlier or tighter the curl means the stronger the genes. The wider the person's nose or nostrils means that you have the ability to take in air, overstood, and fire up that internal sun. So the burning process is fundamentally, so us breathing in through the nose, out through the mouth, is fundamental to cleansing the blood in the human body. Do you understand? A fundamental process. It's the kind of one of the core things of what we're describing as life. It is life. Breathing, the ability to breathe. So the bigger the nose, you understand, means that your efficiency in taking in air is greater than somebody with a small aquiline nose and very small nostrils. You understand? But one is considered to be beautiful, one is considered to be ugly. Understood? So these are the types of things that the knowledge that you have inside will determine how you see a thing. Are you seeing it for what it really is, or for what somebody else wants you to see it as? And often case with us, as Negroids, yes, our dominant genes in the first people are not seen as aesthetically pleasing in the Western Hemisphere, which creates insecurities, creates guilt, creates wannabes. So I don't want to be myself, I want to be them. Do you understand? Within more so in our children. You can do everything right with your children, for example, raise them right, bring them in certain environments, etc. And yet when they're in school, maybe some of you have experienced that, you feel inferior maybe to some of the other kids who've got straight hair, and maybe saying, oh, I want straight hair, I want that look, I want I want that type of body. Do you understand me? But yet, because it feels inferior. And this is one of the things that was taught in 63 in books like the 9 Ball, all the way down to the Right Knowledge series now. It's talking about 6 ether being in the atmosphere. You understand? And it sounds strange when you say it like that. Oh, but this is important why we need to learn to raise our intellect to what the master teacher is trying to convey, because effectively you're getting it from our ancestors' point of view, or the Mutharu point of view. You're not getting it from the European Caucasian point of view. So I don't understand what's going on. So you're thinking about, well, how could a child who has had no seemingly influencing factors feel that inferiority? They got two parents or whatever, female parents, black household, things are culturally right. Maybe they've traveled to different countries, seen had different experiences, even at a young age. They then go to school and then feel whatever in school that's not of their own people, whatever, different mixed race or whatever, and feel inferior to certain races in the room, because in certain areas or countries or whatever, it's being broadcast constantly in that atmosphere. Those concepts, the TV is constantly showing. If you're in the UK, you can't say the same for the States, but in the UK, for example, the state television, state-sponsored television in particular, for years is obsessed with interracial dating. You date whoever you want, fall in love with whoever you want. But in this context, they're not reflecting the reality of the population makeup. They're reflecting someone's agenda that if a black man and white woman come together, or a white woman, a black woman and white man come together, that is seen in society, in inverted commas, as progression. You understand? And so when you're looking at films, movies, so on and so forth, remember these ideologies or thinking, or when they make these programs, so it's constantly being broadcast. You know, it get picked up through television, but what about from the point of origin to when it gets to television? What happens in between there? Those things can't be picked up by beings who have melanin understood and can pick up any frequency. They're influenced by any frequency in certain environments. So it's in the atmosphere, and through advertising, so on and so forth, in and around you. And without a strong core, a solid foundation, you understand, of knowledge, information, being formed by outformation based on who you are, your being, having a real solid core foundation, of course you're going to be influenced in certain environments. Certainly if you are ignorant to what's going on spiritually, where others are aware of these skills, abilities and talents and know how to manipulate in a way where they can program environments. That's why it's called a television or television. Let's get that right. Television. And it delivers programming. They're programs. Well, who's it programming? And it's called a program. Who is being programmed? Yeah, the watcher. So white people who are watching it, for example, are being brain washed, because they are given the impression that they are superior to other races. You understand? But a lot of their story is based on mythology. Let's be quite honest. You understand? All based on mythology, things that have not happened, but television screen, they're superior. But the real stories and the real through television, the Nagari, for example, is being brain dirtied. I don't know of any program, let's say we're talking about this previous classes, the television, the media, film, all of that really is between 2 points, really: black exploitation and black humiliation. You understand? And really, the end point is humiliation. Unless we're really making the programs, unless we're the ones doing it, funding it ourselves, etc., being broadcast on our own channels, generally in the West, it's between those two. And so I think I saw a film the other day, Black Adam, thinking, this is interesting. Alignment there with sort of ancient Egypt, where they've got a kind of mixed-ish figure playing the kind of main character, and then they've replaced, let's say in the comics, I think there's a character named Hawkman or something like that, and they replaced him. Usually, I think he's been depicted as white in certain comics. Replaced him with a black character, and I never see a character take so much licks in a movie. You understand? So he's supposed to be a strong character, but you never see the man take so much beating in the movie. You understand? Not everything was an L from start to finish. Everything was an L for this character. You understand? So this is what they do, because the humiliation within Negroid who's really watching it, maybe put a bit of their soul on the line. Oh, hey, it's a black character in the movie. it's generating these feelings of negativity. Do you understand? Which certain forces are designed to feed off of. So that mechanism or medium is then we're looking at is causing us to emit energy, negative energy, understand, stress, understand, type energy. Yeah, because this is and subliminals in the children, it produces subliminals, doesn't it? I don't want to be like that character because that character's not strong. That character's not winning. And saying that character's not positive. Everybody doesn't love that character. When they put the black characters together in a lot of these films, what do? They make them argue with each other. Whether it's male, female, whether it's male to male, whether it's female to female. They show them in conflict. So there become other white people around in the movie and the two black characters in the thing, they make them argue with each other. In all these types of situations. Understand? So whether it was one of these Marvel films I saw, the character I think who plays I can't remember what's he play. Anthony Mackie plays a particular character, I think, in one of his Marvel movies. Yes. And he was in a Captain America movie. So Captain America's the white, American hero. You understand? Can't do no wrong hero. Anthony Mackie is playing his sidekick. Him and in one of the movies, him and the character played by Samuel L. Jackson, Nick Fury, I think his character is. You notice in the movie they're constantly going back and forth with each other, arguing. Yeah, Nick Fury is supposed to be the top character in his field of endeavor, but they make the two characters argue with each other. You understand? And the white guys are the reasonable characters. You understand? Etc. etc. So they're always creating conflict. And now, as you understand, that these conflicts create a certain energy response in us when we're watching them, which is say cause us to emit negative emotions, which feeds the six and other forces. Now, lower the six forces. So we end up at a point where, long story short, where we're talking to us about the impact of genes. You understand? And understanding, as I say, who you were from an energy point of view, or spiritually, some say, you understand, but from as a soul being, you understand? So what you were is that. So when you now come in and you're born into the physical, that you're a being, a soul in this vehicle, referred to as a physical body, and you have a 4 generational makeup, in the sense. So when they say 4 fathers, you literally do have 4 fathers. Your father, first generation, you call father or dad or whatever the case may be, versus, you understand, your granddad, great granddad, and then your great great granddad. In the sense, so the great great is the last line 4 generationally, where everything that's affecting you now is can be from 4 generations. So 1 in 30 chance, for example. So those people, if you put yourself at the top of the pyramid, would make up around 30, would make up 30 people, including yourself. Understand? Influencing wise, however, if your parents are alive, then let's say your mum was alive, then that influencing factor would go down by 1, so 29. If your father's alive, then it would go down by another 1 to 28. So influencing factors. Now you can look like or inherit any of the characteristics of those 30 individuals, understood? But when we talked about spiritual ignorance, it was the fact that one of the things is that we taught to ignore, not to pay attention. We didn't keep great records in slavery, yes, of who these individuals were. And you're not taught to keep records or understand who these 30 people are in your family, because it would show the driving or influencing factors of who you are. It'll certainly give you some strong answers and strong foundation to the very characteristics you have and why you react to certain situations in the environment. Understand? And the voices that you hear in the head give some context around, those types of things. What food you like, what food you don't like. You understand? Certain experiences can be transferred now. So all of this understanding, well, when I get into a relationship with another person, then I'm merging all of those types of complexities together. Understand? So the genes become scrambled and confused, but lust is a very powerful driving force or factor that brings people together, you understand, in terms of sexual attraction, which, as we know, was placed into the sexual process when we split out into man and woman, because male to woman birth is obviously painful for women because the male's genes don't match her immune system. You understand? Those genetic markers, so she creates a shield or a sac, understood? Yeah. To protect the baby from her own immune system, do you understand? And birth, because you know, it's this sperm and ovum that's sent into this gamete, becomes significant in size, isn't it? So by the time the woman literally shape shifts and now has to give birth, yes, to this large being out of this egg, it has a significant toll on her body, taking up to 2 years to recover from a natural birthing process. So why would you want to go through that again? Well, engineered the pleasure principle into the sexual process, or part of it into the sexual process, which makes people want to come back around again, go again. And if not, people might not want to go through that situation again. And now, obviously, we're in a society that has the mechanism to obviously kill babies as they consider them before they are born, by providing a different definition of what life is. So whether you're either pro-life or you're not pro-life. So the reality is, in nature's rules, that baby is still a baby. So in the context, or has the potential to become a baby. If you kill it, then you have to deal with the consequences of that by nature's rules. And that's what man says, whether it's allowed or not allowed. You have to deal with nature's rules. In some instances, there may be super justifiable reasons to do that. You understand? So, for example, severe disability, the outcome of a rape, things of that nature, where the rules are the rules. As we discussed in the last class, can't be altered in the environment. They're designed to work to promote existence and maintain existence in an autonomous way. Do you understand? So there's not some being sitting there making judgments over every phase of decision that's taking place. Similar in your body, you understand? Things are functioning within your body based on a set of rules, and that enables you to live, without interruption. There's no stopping of, well, let's not do that because of X, Y, Z. You understand? You constantly be like a computer with bad connection. You constantly be freezing every minute. So it's designed to optimize liberty so that it doesn't require intervention by somebody having to make a decision. So it's almost self-autonomous. It's a very reactive state. If the rules are hit, then X. If the rules are hit, then Y. You understand? So it's continually progressing. It's not waiting for somebody to make a decision and like, press this or check that decision and make sure it's correct from our perspective. And therefore, yes, you may go. No, that's not how it works. So it's, as I say, almost a automated, if you want to say it, but autonomous environment insofar as, say, very reactive environment. That's why certain times the outcome of the rules may appear from a moral perspective, when you do bring judgment in, they can appear incorrect. You understand? But they happen. So say rape, the babies being born. You understand? Because rules have been hit in terms of what, not compatibility, but in terms of sperm hitting ovum, saying at a certain time, person's fertile, whatever the case may be, the other person's fertile, and it leads to a pregnancy. You understand? Even though morally it's a violation. Now there are other rules that kick in to deal with the rape, but understand the rules that deal with, you understand, what allows a baby, what allows conception, to take place, leading to a baby, kick in also. Understand? So the lack of improper understanding of the physical environment, or the ignorance that we have spiritually of what's taking place, means certainly for us as Negroes and Negaro, we're not optimizing. We're not understanding or making the rules work to our advantage. Understand? And so you could see why, with certain things in place, there's no way you could reach your optimum potential protect in a mechanism of pretending to be another race. You understand? Because whatever that race was designed to, the rules, etc., is optimum for them. You understand? As is their religion, optimum for them. Do you understand? And those who are descended from the prophets and whoever, and even in the context of biblical religions, you understand, or monotheistic religions, if somebody's created in the image and after likeness of God, you understand, as they express, you understand, in Genesis chapter 1, well, the important thing is you need to know, well, who is in the image and after the likeness. Yeah, because if I'm not in the image and after the likeness of that God, that religion can't work for me. I need to find something else. You understand? Because whoever God looked like, that's who he made that religion for. Do you understand? Who's in the image and likeness of? And is it racially biased in that regard? Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You understand? So, because God had a certain look. Described people in the Bible, certainly in Leviticus chapter 13 and 14, they had a different look. So, by way of certain diseases that took place. So, and they encountered people who worship different gods. And so, otherwise, God wouldn't have been jealous. They were jealous. Or telling people, I'm the only God, do not worship any other God other than besides myself, I'm paraphrasing. Do you understand? So there were other gods that other people could choose to worship, or that other people were worshipping, that were not of the origin of the deity of the Bible. And they had power. You understand? And they had power. So to do things. So you understand? A certain perspective has been given, and it drives, as I say, the way in which we think and the way we look at things. You understand? And genes is kind of, not to say the last, that's maybe a bit extreme to use, but it's one of the as we get to know really and uncover the difference between truth, stepping into the next sort of plane, divine reality, you now start to see what actually is taking place. Do you understand? What causes things to happen? You understand? People say everything happens for a reason. They don't really know what they're saying in that regard. Do you understand? But when you start to look at genes, when you start to go back, even back in before genes, when we were in the physical, when we were in that energy state, now starting to see, well, the randomness of things in life are not actually that random. They occur by way of certain interactions that have taken place, leading to a certain result or outcome. So depending on how far you go back, you will be able to see the cause of that outcome. Hence, why, as I say, we talk about in Wu-Sabat, we're interested in the cause that cause and effect. Interesting there. What led to that prior. And that's because that's where we come from. Others are not interested in it because light is dealing with cause and effect. Now the darkness is before that. So because they can't step back or they don't represent that, so no interest in it. If you copy them, guess what? It's of no interest to you too. You understand? In terms of your thinking, because that's what it's trained at. So if you don't have a soul, why would you teach others about having a soul? You understand? Yeah, if that's not your outcome. Yeah, so why would you teach people about that? Or if you, let's say, not teach people about it, if you found information pertaining to that, which gave that story, but your people was not included in it, then you're not going to teach. Your duty, at least in their mentality, is not to teach the ignorant, how to be superior to you who maybe hold a dominant position. You're not going to teach somebody with the potential outcome is to overthrow them. That's their nature. Not to say that the people who they think they would teach would overthrow them. You understand? But what happens is now that leads to a fake society, because you're not teaching truth. You're teaching what you want to teach that keeps you in a position of power, which others label it white supremacy and other different things, names of this nature, to maintain your power base. Understand? And this is wrong racism to, as I say, when you are basically where your race is progressed at the detriment of another race. This is wrong racism. Right racism is racial pride. So being proud of who you are, etc., etc. That's fine, no problem. But when you suppress another race to further your own race, this is a problem. So let's crack into what we were sort of dealing with today. So all of what we've been doing in the last, I think, however many classes, I think since probably 8 or 9 doing science relationships, was all to deal with so you can understand the following 5 pages. So in that regard. So let's work through them and see what's going on. So we're going to start from let's start from the top. Page 30. Interesting. So it says in 122, now you, Nuapu or Musbatu, Nuapians, know the reasons why their deities hide from them and say, if you see me, you must die. Because he is Satir, a goat man, a hybrid creature. Exodus 33, 20, verse 20 to 23. So many people won't be aware, I'm not going to get into this in those detail, but many people are aware that of the extraterrestrial influence of the monotheistic religions, you understand? And as I say, one of the reasons why these sort of extraterrestrials wearing masks, of a certain hiding their appearance, etc. In some instances, it's so that they can't see that the deities or the gods were human beings like them, or in the context of, in this particular case, that their appearance in certain was so dramatic or gross to human beings, that, as I say, that kept themselves behind a certain veil. And the interesting thing about it is, in certain cultures around the world, you're seeing certain depictions of hybrids of human/animal kind of hybrid combinations. And you have to ask yourself, so maybe in the Hindu religion, some deities with multiple arms. In some of the satanic practices, as it's been described in here, you're seeing the image of Baphomet in the sand, part a sort of goat head in the sand, body of a female in the midriff. Do you understand? So these odd type of images that you're seeing, and think, well, where do they come from? Why that combination? Why this? Not knowing, as I say, they relate to certain creatures in terms of experimentation that have taken place on the planet, where extraterrestrials are merging different species together, doing experiments, but then leaving behind the results of these experiments. And in this context here, that's how some of them looked. Understand? And so, created a mystery around themselves, which is effectively, as I say, I've said this before, but your Wizard of Oz story. Go back and look at the Wizard of Oz. And then there's aspects of that. So Wizard of Oz could have been a hideous thinking creature, or has the power to show you, well, I'm just like you. I'm just more mentally superior. You understand? But to keep you from wanting to overthrow who I am, then I keep this air of mystery around me for various reasons in this regard. And so human beings, even throughout history, have had a difficulty dealing maybe with how certain extraterrestrials look. So there's some benefits to them, at least, for hiding their appearance. Now, Exodus 20 to 23. 123. So Israelites now both asked their prophet Moses and Muhammad to show them Yahweh or Allah, and both were denied. Quran chapter 4, verse 154. If you see him, you must die. 124. Why Allah hid behind a veil before Muhammad, or Moses only saw its backside, a hideous or horrible, ugly monster. 125. A Mufyad Mutatal, an extraterrestrial, made their deity. 126. They don't have a clue what they worship these days, and our race has converted to their religions of this Baphomet. Yeah, this part human, part goat, which you see, as I say, in a lot of satanic rituals show. 127. And I am here, Nabab, Yaanuwn, the master Yaanuwn, to warn them They've been deceived by a devil pretending to be God for them because they live by faith and belief and don't answer hard questions as we Musbatu, Wap and Wapians did and do. 128. And they, the Adamites, will do almost anything to get into your DNA. It's a matter of life and death to their race. So we were I suppose we did a reasonable job maybe of in the previous classes showing you how the society is set up in a way that, as I say, is designed to extract or take away from your energy. Do you understand? Whether it's physically, whether it's spiritually, whether it is etherically. It's designed to feed off of you. If you're not aware of this, then, as I say, we become like lambs to the slaughter, so to speak. You understand? And so we talked about earlier about humiliation and things of that nature. That's what racism primarily, in a lot of ways, it does. It humiliates us, causes us to express negative emotions, you understand? Almost in a continuous sense, you understand, as well. Continual drain of us are associated with our people. I'll give you an example of when I say continuous drain, because if you think about it, you understand how your sort of makeup works. Your subconscious brain is an amazing esoteric and physical attribute. Understand? Because any problem that is placed within it is going to seek to find an answer. This is why sometimes you could be whatever in the shower, thinking about a problem that may have been presented to you a few days before, whatever, and then the idea just comes to you randomly, just like that, or appears to be random. It's not that it's random, it's just that when the question was posed and then there wasn't a proper answer that closed out the matter, your subconscious mind continued to work on the answer. Now, why do I say it's continuous drain? Well, a lot of things when you're dealing with racism, they sort of get parked in this, what I refer to as a multi-story car park of BS. Because you might go, for example, I don't know, let's say you're in the post office and a number of different people are being served. And you come to the top of the queue, and saying you walk over to the counter or whatever, and the woman says, "Sorry, we don't serve. I can't deal with your query here. I've got to move to another. I've got to move to another station." So I've got to move to another station. Let's say in that station they're dealing with currency conversion. Yeah, you walk over there before the person says, "Come over." The woman says, "I can't deal with you. I need to move to another station." So you move to another station. So you go back. You've already been dealing with it. Go back to the top of the queue. Woman's faffing around, not doing nothing. Somebody else is being served in another queue. You understand? And then what happens is, let's say we call that where the other person being served is queue A. That's it. Window A, where the woman you're waiting to go and see is faffing around. She's at window B. Now, she's seemingly faffing around after telling you, "I can't serve you at this station." You understand? And then moves to another station, faffing around. The queue station or window A becomes free. So you walk over to window A, and immediately as you walk over to window A, the white person behind you gets called immediately to window B. So when the woman was faffing around, now all of a sudden she became free to serve the white person who's behind you. You've gone to window A, yeah, to this, because this one's become free. Now in your mind, it was weird, isn't it? The whole bit was weird. Now, was it racism or not racism? You don't know. So unless you are prepared to have it out and shout and scream, whatever, or discuss, you know what I mean, and sort of get to some answer to say inside the woman's head who was at B, was the faffing around genuine? For example, was she really doing something? Then became free coincidentally at the point where you had to go to another person to be served. That sits as an unresolved issue in your subconscious mind, which you don't know. You understand? So if it's still working, you understand, on was it or was it not, then Yeah, so that's draining energy for me. Now, it might be a very small amount of energy, but it's like the sort of circle that you see when your computer's thinking about, okay, well, what's happening? Am I loading, not loading? Do you understand? So it's that circle going around that you'd be familiar with. That's sitting there in the sort of subconscious mind. Now, how many of these they now got terms for it? You understand? Excuse terms for it, like microaggressions. You understand? This is what they got these fancy terms now for hate. You understand? Which all effect is racism, but it's hate. Yeah. So that now sits in there. So how many times has that happened to you over the course of your life? Do you understand? We've got these unresolved issues that sit there in the subconscious mind without a yay or a nay. To what it was, to give it some kind of conclusive result for you. And even then, even when you do get a conclusive result, it's still a drain, because oftentimes you're sitting in the loss category because you're the victim in that particular situation. You understand? Resulting in, as I say, you feeling a certain way about it. So that accumulates over time. So a lot of our energy is being wasted. You understand? Wasted in dealing with this accumulation of this disease, human disease called racism, that obviously is designed, as I say, to impart hate upon us from another race. Now, that keeps you, if you're not aware how to deal with it, you understand, that keeps you spiritually weaker than you could be, you understand? But also, as I say, this emission of this negative emotion, you understand, and the impact in your body physically as well as esoterically, puts you in a state where it makes you vulnerable. Others to feed off of that situation. Do you understand what I'm saying? So all these different types of things, the society is set up, you understand, in the way to take advantage of you who has the energy or the link to these what's the word looking for? Yeah. Energy sources that don't run out. And so, yeah, they're unlimited. Yeah, unlimited forms of energy that don't run out. You understand? So been their optimum from the very beginning of things, and don't run out. You understand? So energy can't be destroyed, it only changes in polarity. You understand? So, as I say, you're fighting against this continuously, and one of the things, as I say, that kind of halts that is when you at least know what's going on, or you have knowledge of what's going on, and therefore you're able to squeeze the kind of tube that's sucking or feeding on you physically, esoterically, so on and so forth. Because you're breaking down ignorance, you understand who the adverse forces are against you, and you need to move them accordingly. You understand? And have we call it a strong mentality. You understand? A psychic self-defense that helps you to stay positive even in negative situations. So your countenance, as they describe it as, doesn't drop. You understand? Or doesn't drop, certainly below a certain level, which can make you vulnerable to certain adverse forces that will take advantage of you in a weakened state. You understand? So one of the big issues here is that who they refer to as the devil, not who we, that's their culture, who they refer to as the devil is really God. Understand? And who is God to them? Well, God is really the devil. Understand? Because in those books, who taught you about the devil? Religion did. One of the things religion taught you about the devil. Yeah, the devil gets power because monotheistic religion is constantly continuing saying his name. If there's a being called the devil. Yeah? Anuhu billahi in a shaitani regime or whatever. The Muslims are constantly saying the devil's name. Yeah, and actually, if you look at the numbers of the books and all that, who they say is the devil's number, there's the number of the very Bible on the books. How many books in the Bible? There's 66 books. It originally was 72 books. 72 minus 66 is 6. So according to them, the devil's 66. Their book, went from 72 to 66. Yeah, so and they got the other 6. Even though the number of the devil, according to them, is 616. Again, propagated in various different ways. There's Marvel, comics, and things like music videos, different things you see. Because of a mistake in the translation. You understand? So, but in movies now, they propagate 666. The religion reflects 666. And then even then, you've got 616 as a number associated with these forces, right? So, this is how they say, they talk about evil fair seeming. Well, this is how it propagates, isn't it? Until you're taken out of it, you understand, your brain is, in our case, washed. You understand, our brain was brain dirty because it was filled with nonsense and bad information. So we became brain dirtied, as white people were brainwashed into superiority, tricked into superiority when their genetics, according to fair analysis, do you understand? Critical analysis of human beings from a biological point of view are on the weaker end of the scale, have been brainwashed superiority. We have been brain dirtied the opposite way to inferiority, even though our genes are dominant by design. Do you understand? So, in that regard, all part of the human race. So the trick knowledge, as some refer to it as, is precisely this. You understand? That's what's being covered now, where, as I say, the new religion today is factual information. You understand? No spirituality, excuse me. It's factual information. What Wu-Sabat deals with. Yeah. So the most important thing here that was expressed in the last class was that the way to defeat us is to get inside of us, isn't it? As soon as we're in the DNA within those 4 generations, what was the key thing about slavery? Well, slavery was about blood. You understand? Because the origins of the Europeans at that time, they were hemophiliacs, understood, and needed blood. You understand? Or people with strong blood, with clotting agent or clotting factor, they needed them to keep mixing in to survive. Yeah, so to dominant genetics or genes, they need to mix in, yeah, as a recessive gene trait race, to mix in those dominant genes in order to survive. So on one hand, they propagate hate, like we don't want anybody to mix with us. We're a unique, superior individual race, but yet always are promoting, do you understand, mixing in, which is what their ancestors originally told them to do, because their genetics were inferior. Understand? They are the feminine of the races. Do you understand? Insofar as what that basically means is they're looking to attract other races to them for that reason. Do you understand? So there's 6 ether, 3 ether, go stationary in nature. Those forces must subsist off of the living, so they represent the dead. You understand? But they must feed off of the living in order to survive. You understand? And so now the feminine of the race is drawing others towards them for that reason. You understand? So at their core, by their design and nature, that is what they require. So promote racism that we don't want to mix, and then push information in movies, television, otherwise it says the complete opposite of that. Understand? So in that regard, and that's, if you think about it, when you've been bullied or you're a victim of I don't know, domestic violence and things of that nature, or torture, they talk about the psychology or the impact on human beings of wanting to please the individual or individuals who are inflicting the damage upon them. You understand? So you want to please the bullier, or the bully, excuse me. You want to please the bully so you don't get bullied anymore. You want to please the torturer so you don't get suffer more torture. You understand? You want to please the partner who's delivering this domestic violence so that the violence stops. You understand? And it changes the nature of what you perceive is good behavior. Do you understand? So not getting slapped in the face seems to be a positive experience than not having the fear of ever being slapped in the face, or fear of violence, or no violence at all, living in that environment as considered to be normal, versus not getting it. You understand? Seems to be a positive attribute. Understand? So you have to think of the damage that's been done psychologically to you, even if certain things do not happen to you directly. If they happen to your ancestors, which you're going to certainly learn about more, but it's still there in your genetics. Understand? and can have an impact on you in your here and now, which is why you have to have certain mechanisms in place to counterbalance, those experiences that have taken place before you, even if you're in your old household or before, in terms of a generation. So, 4 generations is the system that your mental being is born into. So, and the Adamites, will do anything to get into your DNA. It's a matter of life and death to their race. Yeah, so not to you, but to them. It's parasitical. Yeah, the nature of them is parasitical. It must feed off of stronger ills. Now, 129. The Nagaru Negroids are called the Afaf Ka'au Africans, are the root race, having Tasu Sanafu, 9 species, 9 ether, the highest of all human beings, holding their original Sayem, divine Yachasat genes, and from us, original Tahites, Bushmen, little people came forth. The Dravadoids, who were called Indians and Aborigines from the root race, and 30 Aboriginal, 8 Sanafu species, 8 ether, and the Dravadoids have 7 species, 7 ether. The Mongoloid, who are called Asians, has 3 species, 131, and the Caucasoid, who are called Yarapu, Europeans, of 2 genetic traits, a mere red and ruddy race of the Anamites, and the Laben Salah white race of leper, Anu. Canaanites have 6 species and 6 ether. The last 2 Adamites, ruddy, and Canaanites white, are diseased and plagued, and seek your Yachasat genes to offer your soul to their demon deity, Pan. So, we explained to you in the last class, throughout this diagram. So, effectively, you have ethers of energy, and you have obviously what we describe there as physical ethers. So, physical ethers, we say physical ethers of the Nagaru race. What you're effectively saying is that in the Nagaru race, there are 9 species of Nagaru within the race, or say upgraded terminology for those maybe new on the call. Race should really be planetary nation. You understand? So within a planetary nation, you have certain species. So in the black race, or also known as the all race or all nation, being that root seed, you understand? All races come out of us. You understand? Therefore, we have 9 different species. So you can see that the Bushmen in South Africa, or Bush people or persons, you understand, in South Africa, or the Sands people, yes, are the root seed of all human beings on the planet Earth. Do you understand? Who originate here, let's say. And they're, if you see, they're very caramel skin tone, you understand, versus maybe somebody in West Africa or the Congo, who may be very dark in skin tone. So within those two, within the range of Hugh Mim and Hugh Min, as a race, we have different hues. Understand? Yep. And it's all of it is part of makes up the black race. Understand? Not dark. Everybody's dark. Not everybody's light. We've got a range or blend of hues between the two. Understand? Which makes obviously us up 9 ether. But as we know, ether, when you're talking about not physical, deals with energy, as you can see there, and it's the medium, or can represent the medium of how energy, as I say, is transferred from one place to another. And you've got various different types of ether in the various different types of energy. So complex plethora, but for example, as I say, heat. In order for heat to be transferred from one place to another, it requires a mechanism in order to move. That mechanism is ether, or a certain type of ether. So ultra gaseous matter ether, for example, allows heat transfer. You understand? So different types thoughts require mental ether to move from one place to another. You understand? So it's a network. It's energy, but it's also the network that allows energy to move from one place to another. So obviously, a 9 ether being is able to span the whole of the energy spectrum, because 9 ether represents all energy. So it's just in everywhere, in any place. At its point. So you have different types, and then as you step down, isn't it, you're getting what would be described as a somewhat it's less potent form of that energy. Do you understand? As we step down, but this diagram here is describing physical ethers in different races on the planet, and as I say, these are species then within those races. And so when you're Bongalu, yellow seed, for example, they have 3 different species within them. So Chinese, for example, Chinese as a nationality are different, for example, to Japanese, who have maybe more Nubian features. You understand? And why this is important in us understanding these type of things, because different characteristics or traits within races, act as they're like markers for who designed them. You understand? So, and again, in depleting our ignorance around things of this nature is, for example, like the folded eyelid, you understand, which people might say Chinese eyes, you understand, or Oriental eyes, for example, is not an Oriental trait. It's an African trait. As we demonstrated to you before, when we were showing you the Sands people. Do you understand the characteristics of the Sands people? The Sands people, you can see when we get to the next slide. Yeah, so their folded eyelid, for example, that is a bit difficult to see there. But you can see that this is it's an African trait long before it was Oriental. You can say it just happens to be one of the primary features of that of the Oriental, because the group of extraterrestrials that created them and their ancestors, that was their marker. That's their barcode, for example, for that race. Now, being the root race, understood, we have all of those characteristics of those of the root races in the one race. So the pingly hair, indented chin that we see with the Dravidoids, you understand, or Dravidians, you understand, and the protruding forehead of the Aborigines, you understand. You see here 7 physical ethers species, 3 ether we saw in that diagram there, is it 9 ether, there's 9 there, 8 ether for the Aborigines. Yeah, but they don't have the coloured eyelid, the light colour, colourless, you understand, iris and pupil of the Caucasian. You understand? So we don't have that trait. It's not a naturally occurring trait, an engineered trait, not engineered. But it's the difference between, sort of get your understanding, when somebody classifies, let's say, food as organic versus not organic. So organic, remember, it's raised a certain way, maybe considered to be natural or more naturally ways in which it's grown and cultivated, versus non-organic. Understood? And all to get the definition or classification, let's say, of organic, you have to, understand, be aligned to a certain registration process, certain growth process, is then checked, and you align maybe to a certain organizational order that gives that classification out. You go rogue and you don't do those things, then your product will not be considered to be organic. You understand? And in the context of races or production races, okay, boom, there's a galactic federation that's run by these Natharu, who the Egyptians refer to as the overseers on Natharu, you understand, whose name is Muzaku, and they have a classification of how planets are populated, you understand, how they're regulated, and if you fall in with that, then that's considered to be what we call natural, because it works within nature's system, versus something which is unnatural. Understand? So, and works maybe anti or against that system. Understand? So, natural is still a classification. Understand? To call something natural versus not natural. And even within things that are considered natural, there's still engineering going on. You understand? But who's doing the engineering? And you understand? The way it's done, will consist of whether that gets included in the natural classification versus engineered or artificial, so on and so forth. Do you understand? So you have to understand that from a almost from a race perspective. Yeah, there's still classifications going on, even though people say in this society, "Oh, race is it's a social construct." Well, yes, in that context, for some, it may be a social contract. We're going into the genes, and what's showing in there is the evidence. Yeah, because what's happening now is many are trying to jump in or co-opt themselves because of the looseness around the race definition, for example, and trying to add themselves in to now be classified as a race when their stories of their origin are fake or unproven. So fake, yeah, fake for now. Unproven. Understand? So it's like the Bible and things of that nature. So if people are, for example, seeking to now be classified, so oftentimes, sometimes when somebody is abused religiously, for example, they now are saying, well, that's racism. Yes, somebody has a religious title, it's got nothing to do with race, but they're now saying, well, that's racism now, when they have a religious title. Yeah, where in the context of religious title, you can have people who are of Jewish descent from any country around the world. Same people who are Muslim descent, they can be of any country around the world because it's a religious title. It is not it's not found in the genes of the person. Do you understand? These are characteristics. When your parents were it, and they followed that particular tradition, and therefore, understood, you then inherit it. So that's how it is. You then take on those traditions, culture, whatever the case may be. Or something that's transferred in that context. It's not a genetic marker that says, oh, you are that religion, which you would think there would be, given that God created them in image and after their likeness. So there should be a genetic marker that says, okay, you are of this type. It doesn't work like that. You understand? So these markers or traits are programmed in there, much like, as I say, you've got products that have barcodes on. These perform a similar function of identification. You understand? And really, for those who are aware of certain groups of extraterrestrials, and it's on a planetary level, it's okay, they have that marker, they belong to this group or whatever, don't mess with them. You understand? Anybody else, or if they don't respect the designer or the owner, or the designer has abandoned their race or their children, so to speak, then they make it a fair game. You understand? A cold world. It's a cold world. A cold game. You understand? We deal with planetary dynamics. Yeah, just because we're not aware of it doesn't mean it's not going on. Any questions? Just get to where we want to talk about today. Let's check the chat. No, no questions. It's quiet today. Okay, so well, so back to that diagram. So you can see here now with these physical ethers, yes, and the reason why you got differences between 6 ether and 5 ether is because the females white females or Caucasian females vibrate at a higher rate than their male counterparts. Yep, and from an energy perspective, and then 5 ether, so they vibrate at 5 ether, which is the lowest of all races on the planet. These here decide, so these are describing, as I've said, these are describing physical ethers, not ethers of energy, but they can align to ethers of energy as well. So it's slightly a double meaning, but it's it can be used 2 ways. So really, if they said put physical in between that, you have a better understanding. So here it's describing 3 species within there. Do you understand? 4 species within, so on and so forth. If that makes sense. Yeah. So, and yeah, so you can be a 9 ether being, for example, which is talking about us having 9 species, but we have 9 senses as well, which is our 5 physical senses, and our 4 higher senses, which gives us 9. And in the Holy Tablets, in the 7th chapter, it calls a being of that, of a complete being of that nature, as Nathar Patar 10. You understand? So in Nathar Patar 10, it's a being who's fully expressing all of their sensual attributes. And so our five senses, which are really all the sense of touch, you understand, see, taste, so on and so forth. And your four higher senses: clairvoyance, psychometry, telepathy, and intuition. So that will give you 9. Yeah, Natharata 10. Understood. And the gland that's missing, so your endocrinal glandular system, the Barafri gland was the additional gland, obviously, that was removed, that not only enabled these higher senses to work. Usually that gland sat within the hippocampus area of the brain, but it also secreted, because hormones secrete chemicals into the body that enable certain transactions or activity, let's say, to take place that can affect behavior. You understand? So in that time, our ancestors, when they were in the physical form, for example, as the Natharu, that gland secreted monatomic elements into the bloodstream. Do you understand? So what people refer to as liquid gold. It's got many different names, philosopher's stone, different names, but or white gold for us, understand? So secreted gold into the bloodstream, monatomic elements, understand, which made the DNA strands work 10,000 times more potent. Do you understand? So what would be described as maybe superhuman attributes or capabilities today were innate within us naturally when we were Natharata 10, Natharpata 10, you understand? Having all of our senses activated. So the important thing is we vibe up the whole spectrum, you understand? In that regard, excuse me. And this is just showing the makeup between of male and females to really show that, the lineage or lineage is always kept within the mitochondrial DNA. You understand? So the mitochondrial DNA, you see the symbol is what? It's the symbol of our hair texture, isn't it? But also a symbol of nine ether. You understand? As characterized in our natural hair texture. Yeah? Tighter the curl, stronger the gene. So that in that direction is obviously reflecting the past. A male DNA can only go forward, isn't it? So in that regard, so yeah, you are the combination of your mum, you're 1/3 your mother, 1/3 your father, and then the two create a new you as the third to make up the whole. Do you understand? But you only inherit obviously your father's DNA. You don't inherit your grandfather's DNA. Understand? In that regard. So you get that through the mitochondrial side. So not father to son. Understood? So we understood this principle, which in our culture, as I say, you think about, their virgin birth story or whatever. It makes absolutely no sense because you can't produce a male child without the presence of a Y chromosome from a male. So you can't have a virgin birth in that sense. So Mary could not have produced a child without the presence of a male. So to produce a male child as the output, she doesn't have a Y chromosome. But women can produce another female child if she can clone herself. And so through a process called parthenogenesis. Bathing glands, either side of the vaginal orifice, to secrete a seminal type fluid, which is what we were talking about in the last class. We explained how women lost their power, you understand, how she fell in love with her own creation, you understand, as the male, and then became reliant on him in order to fertilize her eggs, you understand, so therefore gave up subservience to the male for that reason, you understand. So obviously being able to be both, which is where she has to learn back and restore those powers, being able to produce women by cloning if she wants to, or mate with a male if she wants to progress, fulfill her physical purpose, or one of her physical purposes at least. She's not reliant on her male so that she starts to take back control again. Now, the virgin birth story, obviously, we can take it back to our story of Tutankhamun, not Tutankhamun, Tutankhamun. You see that Tutankhamun, remember, I think we've explained this before, but quickly go over it. Tutankhamun was not considered, his father was Ankh-Enatun, Ankhenaten, they say. Yes, he was married to Nefar Tweet, they're called Nefertiti. You understand? So those two were married, but the royal bloodline goes through the what? The mitochondrial line, correct? Now, Ankhenaten, you understand, had sex with a woman who's considered to be, well, she's his partner, but considered wasn't married to her. You understand? They use terms like concubine, etc. He was basically his mate, but not by marriage. And he had Tutankhamun by a woman named Kia, who was not of the royal bloodline. Do you understand? So he had a child, male child, who's not carrying the mitochondrial DNA in that context, and it's not coming from the royal bloodline. You understand? So he married, Tutankhamun married his sister. You understand? By the name of Anach Sen or Anach Senantat Pa-Atun. You understand? Or Anach Ankh Sen Patun. That's how they call it. But Anach Senantat, your daughter, yeah, Pa-Atun. You understand? So, in that regard. So, in marrying her brother, listen carefully now, she gave birth to his throne. Yeah, so his ability to sit on the royal throne was because he married his sister. His sister is of the royal bloodline through her mitochondrial DNA. He marries his sister, and that enables him now, or gives him the seat now, to ascend to the throne because of who he's married to. Understood? Because his mother was not of royal birth. You understand? So Tutankhamun is who they're calling Jesus, real Jesus in our culture of 2,000 of years ago. Do you understand? That is that character. Do you understand? So there was a virgin birth in the context of she gave birth to the throne without the aid of the sexual process, isn't it? So basically, he came to the throne, you understand, and was the Hara or Ha or Jesus of that time without, you understand, throughout sexual process by way of his sister. You understand? So his sister gave him the seed. You understand? So in our story, the virgin birth story makes sense. You understand? Because that savior or the Ha of that day and time was birthed in Sen, or given his seat or authorization or authentication of his seat came by way of marriage. Instead, not through two people having sex together, which is how instead who were both of royal blood, which then give birth to a child who was eligible for the throne. Do you understand? Yeah. So important for us to understand mitochondria and the importance that it plays in holding the physical history, you understand, of our race, you understand, and then the male propagated forward, which only is one generation passed on. Do you understand? So the differences between the two. So you have to understand those rules, and we navigate the system, you understand, around those rules. You understand? Understanding past, present, future. You understand? And and the other characteristics that come with it. So we've got two souls. One in the physical that deals with the breath, the ruach soul, or rawuch soul, do you understand? Which deals with the breathing, your breath. Yeah, in through the nose, out through the mouth, proper way to breathe. Yes, and then your again, what people refer to maybe as the esoteric side of us, yeah, the real you, yeah, is the ba'a soul. You understand? So when they say emotions, which is energy in motion, understood? Yeah, we're getting our energy from the soul, and then in this context, in the physical at least, that we're able to move around or activate that as a result of the second aspect of our soul, which is breathing. So breathing it through your nose, out through your mouth, that fires up your internal solar plexus. Understand? So when you die and you stop breathing, and you're going to live on as done what necessary to protect being, then this is what will move to that next thing. Because This also, as energy, reflects the mental aspect of you. Excuse me. Excuse me. Yeah, the mental aspect of you. So as that connection to the source of you as things projecting themselves down here into the, at least in this context, the physical, as a soul being, and to that connecting. So you need this, you need the ka'ah, yeah, and you need the achach, the ifrik, those three principles that need you need at the point of death. Caucasians don't have this, yeah. So they have the achach, the ifrik, have the spiritual spirit being. They do not have the soul, that connection there. You understand? Evidenced by the rawah, you understand, or rawuh. When they breathe, you understand, the lunar plexus has different effects. So see, it's their breathing, but it's not firing up the internal sun, which they don't have, it's not lit. So they're not burning black, which is why you have the color that you have by way of carbon and your melanin. Now, here we see our personality or characteristics is captured here in two ways. So spirit, nafash, the person and personality, and again in a similar way, that is that ka'ah is describing like the vitality. Do you understand? That sits in that regard. Now, important thing about this is that what enables you to draw down the mental, understand, or your aspect of the mind down is the ka'ah creates that relationship to make the connection between you and the projected you. So the source you and the projected you. So the source being a mental reservoir of information, and then the projected down, obviously, which you're referring to as my mind. You understand? Or my individual portion of the mental reservoir. It provides that function. But in the context of it linking to the genes, it provides the vitality, you understand, or the energy that sits behind that, which is why it's showing the two in combination with each other. How is our nafash or personality expressed? Well, this is being expressed in our genetics, isn't it? Our DNA, our RNA, is where our personality traits are being captured. You understand? But we also have the issue of inherited characteristics that sit within our bloodstream by way of these 30 personalities within us. So what's good also about here is showing us that, yes, what? Influenced by past, do you understand? Which is going to affect one's future. Do you understand? So the thing with understanding about our genes and the combination of this working is twofold, isn't it? One, what are you? So we're talking about that in several of these classes. What are you? First, in the first instance, because whatever you are denotes what you need to do to transform into what you're supposed to become. You understand? Remember, initially started in saying the rules of things or existence are being, becoming, became. So understanding what we were when we came out of stillness into motion, well, what are we? You understand? Because understanding that will mean that you will then cultivate the necessary actions and activities to ensure that you end up in became. You understand? Being, becoming. So becoming, what the activities that foster growth, and became, you understand, into what we are. Understood? And cycles then starting back over again. So if you're only taught that you're men and women, then the bar is going to be pretty low. You understand? But if you're supreme beings now, then the bar obviously is going to be, like, what you need to do is going to be higher. So this is why everybody on the planet is not the same. Yeah, and they don't have the same potential or development journey based on who and what they are. Do you understand? So we've ended up in a situation where we've forgotten who we are and have to deal with the what we became within this society. So making decisions primarily out of survival and adopting, as I say, a culture which was foreign to us in the ignorance or in the absence of another competing proper alternative that has been rubber stamped for our people as this is your culture. This is your spiritual science. These are your practices. This is your type of food you should be eating. Do you understand? For your physical body. Do you understand? Everything that was optimized for you. Yeah. Whereas most things in this society, particularly in the West, are optimized for them, and you have to live with it because you're not in control. Understand? So the journey to becoming your own, understand, which ties into the own sound or chant, understand, the original vibration, yeah, of creation within existence, understand, is what we have to get back to, because that's us, that's our origin, that's where we came from, understand, that's who we are. Yeah, and that's why our development journey doesn't minimize itself to one lifetime in us mastering some of the mastering the physical environment, or physical existence, you understand, or physical plane as we would have it. So important here, and we're going to get into this. I've got a bit of a long-winded way of understanding how past, yeah, genes and genetics influences the future. And the reason why we're going back to the past, when you understand the science of Wu-Sabat and the methodology of why the master teacher is going back to come forward, is because you're going back and you're learning about, well, in Wu-Sabat, you're learning about the very origin of things. But we started going back so that we could at least understand who and what we were, we're talking about past or are, in the past when we was at our highest state, before or pre a lot of the interactions or interceptions in our genes, understood, had taken place. So we had to understand, well, who are we? Or who were we, if you want to describe it in the past context, and then bring that forward into the now, you understand? In order then to take control of our future again. Yeah, because the damage primarily had already been done physically, correct? Because the interceptions have already been happened. But if the mind can be taken back along the genes, yes, yeah, and taken back to understand a different and perceived by way of right knowledge, right wisdom, right understanding into an overstanding, leading to sound right reasoning. If the minds of the descendants can be changed, then you can take control of the future DNA, because the decisions we're making lead to different outcomes. We're not leaving it absent, as in belief and faith. You understand? Belief and faith, which is ignorance to us, is acceptance of things you don't know to be true, understood, mean that you're leaving this empty space. Yeah? And others are filling that gap. Yeah? When we're not in control. Give you an example. 2012, remember, represents a shift within nature to restore the woman back to power, female leadership. The same thing happened in the 1970s with the birth of the new souls that came here, had a more of a seek and destroy mentality. And actually, it's the output of 4 generations of abuse. You understand? So, therefore, that new generation coming in of 1970s down were designed to take on board this new doctrine, take on board this new mindset and new understanding, you understand, and be themselves and not having to, shuck and jive, so to speak, you understand, for survival. And that's not a denigration to our ancestors who had to do that for survival. They was caught in the circumstance they were caught in, you understand? And rapping, or the ability to rap or MC, was a way, which was a gift, you understand, for us to retain information. You understand, that we could spit, as they describe it as today, out these facts, these doctrine. You understand, this information. You understand, bringing it back to that sound right reasoning. But if we're not in control, we're not ready, it gets hijacked, isn't it? So you've gone from the conscious rap to the gangster rap. You understand, and how it's been co-opted now. There's, conscious rap's still there, but it's not as prevalent as it was in its early stages. It was much more. How can I say? Cultural rap, you understand, certain things were frowned upon, you understand? But you had other types of rap, but it didn't dominate. It wasn't just one vibration. There was multiple aspects of it to reflect, different people within our species, you understand? And the complex kaleidoscope of our kind of personalities. Conscious, going to be hard, you understand? want to love. You understand all these different elements and aspects to it, and to some degree, yeah, you had obviously classy and more trashy kind of aspects to it, but certainly had a conscious angle to it as part of the main kind of what was promoted. You understand? Now it gets co-opted and hijacked and shifted when you're not in control. Understood? And so we see that the sort of change of vibration with the gangster rap coming in, not in a state of rebellion against the status quo, which wasn't working for our people. Do you understand? Which is part of the spell. Yeah, the status quo was in there. The rebellion was in there, insofar as not overthrowing any kind of governments or anything of that nature, but overthrowing what the information that was keeping us in a certain formation. It was bad for us. So the rebellion was to rebel against it, to transform, not in their image and after their likeness, but to become in our image and after our likeness. Do you understand? The foundation of that obviously is what? Male and female coming together to produce supreme beings, not to produce children that we don't know the outcome. Now, in a similar sense, you can think about in this timeline of change, in the last half an hour from the last cycle of 6,000 years, down from 97 down to year 2000. Remember, all of that was also bringing in the shift from patriarchal to matriarchal again, back to natural again, as we would see it as. And the 2012, you understand, where the axis of the planet points towards the center of the galaxy, or will point away from the center of the galaxy, which changes the nature of the energy on the planet. So that was bringing women back into power by way of the emergence of what they refer to as 2012. 2012 not started in 2012. It started before then. And so I'm talking about a shift in consciousness. Then by way of the planet, like a better word, having an orgasm, which is why everybody feels so spiritual and awake and so on and so forth. Now, that the shift into seeing more female leadership, which is what 2012 symbolized. Again, if you're not in control, what does it get? It gets hijacked again. So instead of it being a symbol of female leadership, females coming back to power, you understand, in a positive sense, what are we seeing? We're seeing extreme, you understand, misuse of the sexual power, you understand, and messing up the genes, so to speak, where nothing's wrong with breaking away from the religious conventional standards of what sex is, or what, you understand, experiencing pleasure should be, because we know in the monotheistic religions all of that was suppressed. Do you understand? The extreme of that being female genital mutilation or female circumcision. You understand? As it's referred to as, because males did not want those women to experience any pleasure in the sexual process. Whereas we understand in our culture, if the woman does not have a orgasm, she must experience another incarnation in this planet as a minimum. Yeah, because she's not complete. It's part of her spiritual development or spiritual journey. Understood. And males need to know how to, you understand, perform sex correctly or properly in order to help women achieve their orgasm. So you need to know both sides, you understand? Sex affects us or has different consequences, as I say, for both of the different gender types. Yes, so context of males are weakened physically, women are weakened genetically. And so in this context of pleasure from sex, for example, remember the rules. You want to achieve the maximum amount of pleasure with the least adverse results, because for much pleasure one must experience, they must experience the equal amount of pain. Now, the point is that shift in female leadership, because we're not in control, has been hijacked by, you understand, the Mukasu. You see now arguments taking place now, not only between the different genders, but the significant expression of sex in a way that, even if you say it's disrespect to the partner now, then, well, you're curtailing that person's freedoms, or you're trying to police what women should and shouldn't do. Do you understand? If a person can be a prostitute now, and you can't even say that's negative. You understand? People say, well, it's a sex worker. Da, 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 da. Well, yeah, cool, no problem, etc. So, I don't know, maybe shame and embarrassment or things that were connected to certain behaviors don't want to be called out anymore. Now, as I said to you, it depends what you're supposed to be developing or coming into. Do you understand? If you are just men and women, then maybe that's behaviors fine. Do you understand? To that standard. But if you're supposed to be coming into a supreme being state, understood, then certain things have to be managed. Do you understand? Yeah. If you're, I don't know, a basketball player in the NBA, yeah, if you're lucky, you can't live off McDonald's every day and KFC and all that kind of stuff. If you're intending to be a top athlete in that regard, do you understand? So you have to make changes. Yeah, maybe even now, earlier in your even life, you have to make changes in that regard if you're going to get to that supreme level. In a similar way, as a human being in this world, when you understand our journey to being supreme beings, then there's certain behaviors that don't work with the characteristics that we've been inherited with. You understand? This is something that we say clearly one has to understand in cleaning ourselves up. Another thing you have to understand is that not every correction can be achieved in your lifetime. So in understanding, yes, our past and our future and how it works, by programming or changing your behavior now, you affect generations going forward. You understand? So the corrections are going to be made in future generations going forward, in the next 4 generations. You understand? That change can take place to a point where 4 generations' time, the change is made now, then we can achieve perfection in 4 generations' time. When the next wipe or shift, do you understand, takes place within the genes. So a less self, and not to say that one should not seek to optimize themselves in their own lifetime, but from the very beginning you were taught it's always about the children. You understand? And so in understanding that, yes, your children are your future. Do you like what you see? Well, program their future by changing your behavior. And if you've obviously got children self now, then instilling the right types of things in them is also programming the future. But then how you live is also about how you take control of the future. This diagram is important to us to understand the power of Wu-Sabat and spiritual understanding, into an overstanding, understood? Yeah, of how we change everything we're doing now on a daily basis has an impact on our fate. So we're replacing faith, because leaving the gap and through ignorance allows others to fill that gap and put their own programming in. As we've said, they've changed the nature of they turn female leadership into extreme sexual expression or behave like men. You understand? When in actuality, that change in or bringing female leadership was to change the nature of the way or the characteristics in how rulership or leadership expressed itself amongst human beings, to change it from self-destruction that was taught by, in a sense, certain groups of extraterrestrials or certain races now in control of the planet, a self-destructive mentality versus self-preservation. In a sense, so the shift was to bring a new kind of leadership approach for the direction of the root or source race on the planet, and in total then change the nature of the energy that's ruling the planet. Not for women to act like the worst of men, or to be men, because that freedom has come with that. So this is where, as I say, you've seen through the media in particular, or social media, maybe it's not the reality on the ground, but the media gives you the feel that is the reality. Because of who is controlling what? The information sources on the planet in a certain formation. Yeah? Who is controlling it? Yeah? Removal of gender identity and things of that nature. Promoting of LGBTQIA. All these different types of things. Who's in control of the planet and what their agenda is in that regard. You understand? So to see a shift the ownership of change, and then the beings who can, you understand, help facilitate some of that change, they're being attacked. You understand? So what is a woman today? Who can say now? You understand? In the context of the media, yeah, versus, say, people wanting to create an alternate view of what the genes and the genetics say. So if you argue it from a religious perspective, you're going to struggle. You understand? Because within these monotheistic religions is homophobic hate, yeah, as it's shown in there. So come from that angle, you're going to struggle. You understand? In that regard, but not for the reasons that people think they're in. I mean, we understand who's speaking, who's giving the orders, and why. Yeah. So remember, Cain killed his brother. Look this up, isn't it? It's like Cain killed his brother and got sent to the land of Nod. You understand? I'll find it quite. Maybe post in the chat a bit later. But yeah, there's a man in the Bible. He let his seed splash on the floor. So withdrawal technique. Yeah, you having sex or whatever. Instead of depositing your seed within the woman's vagina, take it out and you let it splash, you don't get her pregnant. Yeah, God killed that person dead instantly. And so, yeah, that according to their book, and then God killed the person instantly. Yeah, look it up. Yeah, the homework. And so, the fact of the matter is that, yeah, and then. David, their prophet David or King David or whatever, had a homosexual relationship with Jonathan. He wasn't killed dead. He wasn't killed dead instantly. Yeah. So the reality is certain behaviours went on, nothing happened. Man let his semen drop on the floor instead of impregnating the woman. God takes him out straight away. Having that behaviour. Understand? So lack of certain behaviours and what is absolute no in reproducing and producing children, producing seeds, so on and so forth. Yeah. For the reasons which most don't know, yeah, human beings are being created for food, according to their book anyway, at least. Yeah, you see, whatever agenda is feeding the issue, that's what's driving some of the laws, the behaviours, etc., etc. It's not necessarily as you think it is to be. Understood? So, as I say, female leadership, female change, female rulership has been co-opted by others. And as I say, now we're seeing stripper culture, you understand, that type of thing where drug dealer culture more promoted, you understand, as the standard, as opposed to, you know, it at one time being seen in the fringes or the extreme, you understand? And so, yeah, and if a lot of people, it's a thing called religiosity, which the master explains in certain principles. So if a number of different people are doing the wrong thing, you understand? So let's say you're doing the wrong thing, but you want it to be the right thing, you understand? Or let's say you've adopted a certain belief, which you know is wrong, you understand? But if more people, so in terms of the masses, believe as you do, then you're going to feel like you're right, even though what you're saying is wrong. So if you pick up a belief, it's factually incorrect, but a lot of people hold that belief, then it can appear right, it can appear solid, even though it's wrong. So promoting, let's say, stripper lifestyle, you understand? Promoting that lifestyle, so on and so forth. If enough people accept it as the norm, then that's going to feel like it's right, versus when you come along and say, no, that's a denigration of the culture. We can't raise our children that way, blah, 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 blah. Don't attack them, da, 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 da. That's going to feel like it's right if a lot of people are endorsing it and giving it its props, which is what the media does. Whether that's the same thing when the television switched off and in your real lifestyle, you understand? But if you're affected by it, which you are oftentimes, the media emotionally, it does have an impact on your mentality and how you see things or whatever. And let's be honest, you've been bashed so much over the head with a lot of the LGBTQIA thing, whether you believe it or not believe it. If you act up and you're in a job, you're going to lose your job. So now it becomes a survival thing, not to be calling out whatever. You know what I'm saying? So all of that is to say, that's the myriad of nonsense and confusion that you get caught up in. You understand? Now, what stance should you take or whatever? Well, it's interesting to see, well, what my ancestors got to say about this and understanding it and understand genes and what's really going on versus a lot of the nonsense that's going on in terms of all this agenda that's taking place right now, and navigating through that from a sort of factual perspective. And our culture does provide us with the answers, and the master teachers provide us with the answers, which is why I say we were well ahead of the game to some degree. As we go through this, and let's say a couple of the other classes, what I want you to do is to really analyze. Well, in the class that we're going to play, we're not going to probably get it today. We'll do it next week, because you're going to be looking at a number of different videos. What I want you to do is look and show us certain principles that you've been learning over the last, it's now 13 weeks, and extracting out now how certain concepts or you being retaught about your own culture started in Wu-Sabat, and how the scientific world now is sort of catching up with what you were taught in some cases over 20, 25, 30 years ago. You understand? In the case of some of the stuff, going back all the way back to 1963, now being confirmed, at least in their scientific world, confirmed, but they're starting to express these concepts and being taught. Now it seems like, well, they're at the forefront of science and they're revolutionary, etc., in terms of changing things and giving this alternative view of, which debunks Darwin's theory and all of that, which when you, as a student or the master teacher, were being taught these things, you understand, many decades ago, you were ahead of the curve, you understand, but now not getting respect because maybe we're not as popular in the media, sort of them seeing us as the source of where certain things, the source of certain things came from. And now, even in some instances, our doctrine is being turned into, movies and things of that nature, which kind of throws it off and gives it this air of like it's not real. So in that context, but the actuality is part of our story, and unknown to many and unknown to most. Now, so you see here in verse 132 says, you have to protect your DNA from them. 133, you must, as Musbatu or Sabians or Wapians, teach your youth the importance of our DNA and the upcoming genome and the upcoming genome. So notice the upcoming Vanas Tasu feminine, her Yachasat genes, her genome, her DNA. So as we just expressed, if we don't take we haven't taken control from 2012 and the changes that we were warned about that were taking place, and the rise of female leadership. Now, because we allowed that space to exist and we're not in a position of power to be in control, you understand? This is why, whether you accept it or not, they put the master teacher in prison, cut him off from his people, cut him off from giving us that next level of information. So now, no disrespect to her, but Cardi B is the supreme being for women. You understand? Megan Thee Stallion is their supreme being for majority of women. You understand? With the newfound freedom that has come, not in all places around the world, it's changing, but with the newfound freedom that's come, what is being done with it? Are we reversing the insecurities that we talked about earlier in the children, where they're not seeing themselves as the image of beauty, that's found amongst black children? Are we reversing those images, or are we going to the extreme? You understand? Adding fake assets to our bodies. You understand? We're going against nature. We're not. You understand? And self-destruction as opposed to self-preservation characteristics. You understand? So this is when we leave those gaps or we don't take advantage of the right moments in time by enacting the right behaviors and developing ourselves spiritually. There's forces there waiting to take advantage of those gaps which we're not exploiting. Understand? As we expressed earlier. Understand? The stripper is a new female superhero. The drug dealer is a new male superhero. Do you understand? It all for what? For money. Remember, in the 80s, it was expressed. Hip hop is a new rock music. Hip hop is a new rock music. You look at the images of most of the stars that they're calling stars. Yeah, and just think about that. We've gone about that long and for a long period of time, especially to the stars. Stars have influence. You understand? But the real stars are the suns, our ancestors, the Natharu. But remember, today we've got fake stars, social media stars. You understand? Let's say, remember, influence or influencer. You understand? Influencer is what they're called, isn't it? Yeah. But all stars, because of social media, are trying to influence or having influence. Yeah. Influencer, look it up. It's in etymology. Look up the word influencer. We've broken it down before. But remember, influencer and influenza, they almost sound exactly the same. Do you understand? So a virus has been housed our people mentally, you understand, which is interfering with our connection with the true stars. You understand? So we're putting our emotional energy, so of directing it where it's supposed to go, to our ancestors and higher, you understand, and create that cyclical relationship, you understand, of give and take. Yeah, us being restored by way of that connection. We're diverting our energy into fake stars. Others have paid millions and millions and millions of pounds, you understand, to act the fool, yeah, and bring down, you understand, the divinity, the divine connection within our race. You understand? So, as I said, mediation and exploitation is the name of the game. So, says don't confuse, yeah? Don't confuse this with our Zazatatu women of the West who have lived in the image and like the Adamite women who had exchanged tap body fluid before marriage or had more than 3 Ayashu males to 4, married or not, through 5. Taking in all males their Chasat genes and their Salafi ancestors back 4 generations, both mental and physical, sane and insane, all taken in. You understand? 136. So you'll notice those Ashashu females will be more boisterous than the new breed. So that voice of men anger them because of going from male to male all their lives, as taught to be normal in the West, results in her misunderstanding the point of the true Negroid feminine. And so we're gonna not hold that subject. We're gonna get a bit more understanding, yeah, of we're gonna get a bit more understanding. In fact, no, we'll continue that for the moment. We've got about half an hour. Let's continue that for the moment. So what it is, obviously, you know that when you take in genes, both male and female, no judgment from our ignorance, but the rules are the rules. You understand? So you take on board different male DNA, whether it's kissing or the sexual process, take on board the ancestors of that individual male person. Understand? And so whether the person acted right and the relationship broke down, yeah, and therefore you moved on to the next, the reality of the situation is you're still left holding them inside of you. Now, the spiritual ignorance of that, understand? When we say spiritual ignorance, going back to that diagram, is understanding the impact of this nafash or personality, meaning that when you take on board somebody's DNA, as we expressed in the rules of things, remember the rules of a thing and all things are exactly the same. So what that effectively means in us, or how it's manifested itself in us as human beings, as we've taught before, is that each one of your cells contains effectively a map of you, or record, a complete record of you was inside that cell. You understand? So the whole and part is the same. Do you understand? So somebody can take one of your cells and obviously reclone you from that cells. The mental connection will not be there, but the physical aspect of you, how you lived your life, so on and so forth, they can reclone that individual. This won't have your mind, yeah, because that connection you have to be replugged in, so to speak, into the mental. You understand? It won't have the soul aspect in there either. You understand? For those reasons. So you're taking that on board every time you kiss. As a human being, you don't want to take on 4 generations of the person. Don't kiss. Don't exchange fluids. You understand? So this is what happens as a result of us taking it. Remember, you are what you are. Correct? So you are what you put on your tongue. What you put on your tongue becomes part of you. Understood? The science of the 2 males. So human being, male, what you put on your tongue becomes part of you. Understand? Yes? Because injecting you becomes part of your being, because the first part of your immune system is your skin. You understand? And in the science of the 2 mouths, the woman's vagina is her second mouth. So what she takes in that direction becomes part of her being as well. Do you understand? So these orifices are ways into the human structure that then become part of the human structure. If they can't be they become part, and in certain instances they will be excluded over time. Now the problem with being a supreme being, you understand, you're optimized to produce life. You're optimized for the propagation of life. So it's not optimized for loads of pleasure, multiple partners, so on and so forth. Yeah, it's optimized to produce life. Yeah, it's a supreme being. So when you were designed, it wasn't designed in a way that you needed to take on board genes and then get rid of them, take on board next genes. Because when you take on board the one gene, when we're known for, we breed like roaches. Yeah, so that's not really a problem for us. And we didn't need another race to take their genes to strengthen our genes. We were inherently powerful. Do you understand? So, and part of retaining the power is to maintain the purity of the genes, because maintaining the purity of the genes maintains the connection between us, where we are as descendants, our etheric ancestors in this morphogenetic field that stores shape information for all species on the planet Earth, but also is a kind of holding area, or can be a holding area, some of our ancestral energy, and the ultimate, who are depicted as stars, Parnathara. So we've got an ascension kind of journey or pathway that takes up, which is all interconnected. When we were living our spiritual science and our culture, it's all interconnected. So we power our ancestors, or we push them, or help them to push them up by directing our emotional energy, because we're both physical and spiritual, directing our emotional energy to our ancestors and not to other races and their ritualistic or religious practices. Understand? So taking on board the genes of somebody else now causes genetic confusion within you. Understand? It's creating white noise in females, understand, who are, again, propagating life. You want to take control of a nation symbolically. Remember, in their Genesis chapter 3 story, yes, who did the devil, as they call the devil in their story, but in the story was the devil, or how they interpret it, the devil went to the woman first. That's where the focus was. The focus wasn't on the man. You understand? The focus was on the female. So symbolically, in time, that's where the focus is, because if I get you now, what do? I can control the future generations. You understand? And control the future generations. I can stop the propagation of supreme beings being born into the world. Yeah, and we talked about that in previous sessions. Purpose of us as two Nagaru coming together is to produce star children, supreme beings. The purpose of soulmates is to produce star children, supreme beings, not to produce men and women. Understand? It's to produce supreme beings. Yeah, so when we get to a certain level, as you know, in some of the professions that we've worked in, when you've mastered a particular subject matter, characteristic, or behavior in that regard, if you have an off day, yeah, let's say I'm in those progressions of a certain skill, whatever, I've gone from 0 to the highest point 9. And if I've mastered that 9, if I have an off day, for example, whatever, I eat the wrong things, I do whatever, my drop is not back down to 0. My drop is going to be from 9 maybe to 8.5. You understand? Or whatever, 9 point, you know what I mean? 8.7. You understand? And then when I'm back on my thing, I go back up to 9 again. I'm not going to drop all the way back down to 0. You drop back down to 0 when you start something you haven't mastered it, understand, or not been doing it for a long enough time where it's part of your being. Understand? So we need to get ourselves back up to those highest echelons of behavior individually and as a race, so our drop is never down, you understand, to the zeros again. It's back up there and it maintains it forevermore, so no one can't trick us out of our position, so to speak. And so by controlling, already remember, cause the self-destructive mentality by forcibly going in the genes already through the kidnapping. Do you understand? And then from there, we're seeing a media that basically just perpetuates, you understand, all those negative emotions connected with the betrayal, you understand, despicable acts that have taken place. You know, really, in that case, physically, but also continued mentally in terms of the destruction. Yeah, we don't pay enough attention to the psychological damage that these sort of Mettering Goldwyn mayors and others around the world, you know, showing black people in servitude. So long before slavery was considered to be illegal, yes, so it was gone from legal to illegal. How many years were they showing blacks in servitude and, in a sense, as I say, the humiliation and the exploitation through the movie screen? You understand? Which still then is what? Triggering all these negative emotions, still programming the subconscious, etc., which if not corrected, goes unchecked, has this adverse impact and effect. So, taking on board the male genes, here going back to what we're talking about, it creates white noise in the female. Do you understand? Creating white noise. So, not knowing the spiritual information, being spiritually ignorant, now you're thinking, what? All these voices are my voice. You understand? When, in actuality, let's say you have two men in there, the current partner, let's say, and then the ex-partner, well, who's got a problem with the new relationship? The ex-partner, correct? You understand? So, externally, sometimes what can happen, let's say you ended, you the female, ended, you ended the relationship. Now the ex-partner's still phoning, still wants to be in the life, so on and so forth. You know what I mean? It's still kind of hanging around externally. Well, what's there internally? Internally, you've now got a being in there, depending on how the relationship was and the person or whatever. You've got a being in there who wants to mess things up with the new person. You understand? So you now get confusion basically. If you don't know the consequences of having these mixtures close together, so you might say there's takes up to 9 years to remove foreign DNA from the system. So up to 4, interesting number. Yeah, up to 4 now, we can see well, now that white noise becomes so great, we're losing that connection. And potentially, and the reason for that being because you're not in control now. You understand? The decisions being made now, being influenced by these other factors, even though you think it's your voice. This is what's been expressed here, is that the anger towards men ain't shit, this, that, and the other. Excuse my French, but men ain't this or that. That is also coming from competing males with inside the DNA. So not maybe even yourself, but competing males inside the DNA. You understand? So this is what is taking back a characteristic of being incarnated in human form. You understand? Yeah, and it's not wiped out or not cleaned, or the shift doesn't happen. Maybe not clean, but shift doesn't happen for 4 generations' time. You understand? So what you're programming now in these early generations now makes us either beneficial for us in the next level or susceptible in the next level. So that anger is because of and listen, and we've expressed this before, having 4 partners within a lifetime is not crazy. Do you understand? It's not crazy. Having 4 partners in a week is crazy. Having 4 partners in a month is crazy. Having 4 partners in 2 months is crazy. Having 4 partners in 6 months may be considered crazy. Having 4 partners in a year, not to this generation, is considered crazy. To older generations, it's crazy. But in a lifetime, is it crazy? You understand? So they're thinking about when one should end, one should start within this 9-year clearing period of removing foreign DNA from the system. And so we need to keep the count down to a level where you're still in control. So that's without the absence of this information. And he was never going to tell us this. Why? Because I'm interested in supreme beings being born. You understand? And the connection being maintained. Understood? So the influencing factors within the body being expressed outwardly is that one of the last points of knowledge and understanding into an overstanding that you needed to be aware of for the enemy within that works with the enemy without. Yeah, it works with all the advertising and the media influence and so on and so forth in that regard. So if a man hasn't got the right intentions for you and there to use and abuse, then guess what becomes part of you? Use and abuse. Now, the male sexual expression for lust could be expressing itself in the person, right? Not for you, which leads to more misuse of these 4 partners. You understand? So, and if you don't know what's taking place, it's susceptible. Right? We talk about leaving that gap, yeah, for ignorance. This is why they want to control, what information was coming to our people, because it's fully disrupting the plans, isn't it? It's fully disrupting their plans, fully disrupting what they had perpetrated. To be remain mortal, for lack of a better word. You understand that you would not ascend and then leave when you die now. Well, great stuff. They've abused their life, you understand, for ignorance. Excuse me. Now, when they die, they haven't developed themselves enough to ascend to the right ether levels and therefore become a lower battery for us. Now, 137. Her male anger was, for whatever reason, allows her to stress the point of feminine over masculine when it's for the future. Nuwapians or Musbatu, not those used and abused or who allowed themselves to be used and abused sexually before she came to Nawap or Wu-Sabat and learnt about the genetic kiss. Yes, so precisely what we're saying. For ignorance, we found ourselves in this position. Now we know it changed our perception, we changed our behavior. You've got the ability to cut, understand, the fake umbilical cord that's been attached to you, feeding their forces. 138. It's not about you, it's about the next generation whose bodies have not been invaded by male fluids. So we talked about this with that diagram about programming forward. Yeah, so you as an individual may have certain desires and needs, understand? But you've also got responsibility if you take that responsibility on board to your race. Yeah, be expressed in the 9 ball. My teacher explained it. Let's say what is best for you as an individual is not always best for the race, but what is best for the race is always best for you as the individual. So in us changing, we're not only cleaning ourselves up, but we're programming forward in terms of those forward generational impacts. 139. So it's time to stop going from Zazaz man to Zazaz man for support, sexual pleasures, or not to be alone and clean yourself inside out. 140. Excuse me. 140. For those past Ayashu males, affect how you think towards males. Your anger, your outspokenness, your aggressiveness are males of your past speaking from inside your damag brain, being in your DNA now, 141. And this can affect your relationship with a male, even attract you to other females sexually, as Adamites promotes, as Zazatu, women kissing in public, and couples seeking 2 female, 1 male sexual entertainment. 142 is now promoted just as twerking and attraction to the female's butt promote a sexual desire for anal sex, which also affects the male to male on male anal sex. 141 is when it's not born in them, it's a choice by persuasion by the medium. You understand? So again, you're seeing here, excuse me, you're seeing here, as we've talked before, but maybe for those new on the call. So if you think about it, as I say, you've got a male inside expressing their sexual desire inside of you. So hormonally, because their genes are inside of you, they're expressing. So the male, remember, is attracted. If that male is expressing himself, like we showed you before, and depending on its level of influence inside you, they're expressing that attraction to other females from inside to you, even though you're a female. Let me say you're a female, and here it's saying you're not born that way. It's expressing the fact that you are not a hormone sexual. I'm going to go into that in a little bit more detail on next week's class. Do you understand? We did explain last class. So you're not homosexual. You're not attracted. You are not a female who is female physically and a male hormonally, and therefore you are attracted. The internal male is attracted to the external male form. Internal female form, making you then what they're classifying as same sex, even though it's still you understand, opposite gender attraction, even in same sex relationships. So female externally, chemically, you understand, or hormonally male inside, attracted to the external female form, making them same sex. So you're not that. You're heterosexual. You've got a male inside you who is heterosexual, who is attracted to a female form, and therefore, you understand, the influence is very subtle. So maybe you're now saying, "Oh, that woman looks good," or that, not realizing they don't look good because you think they look good. They look good because your ex-partner, you understand, or partners think that the woman looks good, being expressed through you. Now, you may not take that on board. You may ignore it. You understand? But whatever, you're watching The Breakfast Club. Maybe your favorite artist comes on. He's talking about, yeah, man, listen, threesomes is a normal thing for us. It's what we do. Yeah, boom, boom, boom. So now that's another influencing factor. You then see it in a thing, boom, boom, that's another. You see it in a program, TV, that's another influencing factor. Now in the club, you're drinking, let your guard down, whoop-de-woo. You understand? And then now, let the guard, the protection's down. Now this male inside of you gets to express himself. Now you're in a situation where you've had a threesome with somebody who you like. Do you understand? But who was expressing himself? Was it your will, or was it those inside of you will that you interpreted as your thoughts? So I remember we played Gwen McRae. We played that last class. 90% of me is you. So these are the factors where, remember, the external influencing factors by way of advertising, media, you understand, what seemed to be the norm, yeah, and a lot of women, as I say, not say a lot, but a lot of women in media, you know what I mean, expressing their mistakes or whatever, or things that they've done, so that it becomes normalized for them. Yes, normalized for them, so it becomes normalized for everybody. So expressing their mistakes, so it goes out to the masses, so that their bad behavior, which they knew at the time, they didn't perceive it as positive behavior. Now, if everybody else is doing it, now, as I say, the wrong becomes what is perceived as right. You understand? So that religiosity definition works not just for religion, works for a lot of things. Maybe the drug dealer who now sold drugs or whatever, and maybe felt it was wrong at the time, You understand? But now wants to live in a point of justification, for example. If others now don't see it as wrong, then what I did, you understand, is not felt like wrong. Wrong feels like it's now right because a lot of people do it, not because it's right. Because a lot of people do the same thing. Yeah, so this is what we're seeing here. So again, yeah, all this twerking, which was all controversial stuff that's going on at the moment. Yeah, promoting again what anal sex, whatever. If that's what you're into, that's what you're into. But the promoting of, in this context, homosexuality to reduce down, population explosion. Is that not that there's homosexuality is to reduce down homosexuality. Now, promote homosexuality to reduce population growth. Understand? So, and we're seeing even in their advocating for their rights, for example, there's no nuance in there. So, let's say LGBTQIA or whatever, sometimes are black. If you're not operating, this way you have to be careful with the language, because if you're operating from a point of knowledge, you'd understand how the Mukasu, in the sound of the Caucasian, has weaponized, understood, homosexuality, weaponized, you understand, lesbianism, etc., against the black race. They've weaponized it. They've weaponized that type of sexuality against the black race by way of, one, stop population growth, but secondly, remember we talked about what? Humiliation and exploitation in their media. Understand? Forcing adverse emotions. Understand? Which they haven't done for their race. Harrison Ford's never worn a dress in a movie. You understand? He's never worn a dress in a movie. Tom Cruise is, let's say, the archetypal action figure hero, whether what he does behind closed doors, you don't know. But they've never shown him, understand, in that context, or promoted him in a dress. You understand? But yet, when there's black superheroes or whatever, or these things they promote, or masculine, hyper masculine figures, there's always some kind of compromise in there that they're going to throw in. Yeah, you can think about the movies or revisit these movies. There's always some kind of compromise in there. One of the last Marvel movies, the black guy in there who was, I think, an actor in Atlanta, cool character, whatever the case may be. He was the guy in Atlanta. You understand? Now in this other movie, they have him in a male relationship as a superhero with a Latino male partner, and have them kissing. Did they do that with Superman? When Superman first come in the scene, did they do that with Superman? Did they do that with Iron Man? Yeah. So, these are the types of things that happen. And talk about humiliation angle. They blamed him for slavery, and I think in one of the movies. So we got the blame for slavery. Yeah, the black man. So this is the things that they do. Yeah, so the weaponizing of homosexuality, in a sense, within the media, understood, coupled with the homophobic kind of attitude that is promoted in the monotheistic religions, you understand, creates a kind of warped view of that thing from our perspective. You understand? And what I'm saying here is, regardless how you feel, you got to understand, well, what did our ancestors think about that type of situation? What did we ever think about it? Understand, X amount of thousands or millions of years ago. What was our viewpoint on these things? Not what his confused viewpoint. So a lot of things have caught up because our sexual morals are coming from these 613 commandments in this Torah. They've got nothing to do with our people. Understood? Yeah, coming from that in combination with modern day things. But this is what a woman should be. This is what a man should do. This is the role of a man. This is the role of women. Some fake, roles and responsibilities coming out of a book. It's got nothing to do with our people. And in actuality, you don't know the intentions of the deity and why those laws were formed. They're not formed for what you think they were formed for. which just gave you an example a bit earlier. You understand about what they were thinking about. They're interested in the production of human beings as food. And the more human beings there are, the more food there is for us to, feed upon. Angels' food. Yeah, look it up, Psalm 78. Angels' food. Yeah. So, as we're seeing it, promoting in certain societies. And the interesting thing about that as well is that in certain societies, they are more homosexual in their characteristics than others. And they hate, and homosexuality in the context of Mukasu males, in the sense, or white males, then is the foundation of it is anti-women. You understand? So it becomes patriarchal in a way that is anti-matriarchal societies. You understand? So in that particular way. And so you can see, women hatred can be in certain, so that because the perception in the movies is that, you're the homosexual best friend, isn't it? Tell their secrets to so on and so forth. But historically, in certain societies that were underlying, had some homosexual sort of tendencies in there, they were anti-women. You understand? So you have to look at that kind of underlying. Maybe in certain instances, you've got certain, the male to female, male to female transgender group can be seen as sometimes in some sense anti-women's rights. Yeah, so we want to be what we want to be. You know what I mean? Stuff your rights and the impact it has on you. You'll change terminology, do whatever. So it's almost like rough shotting their rights into not really thinking about, if you've got two competing equality strands, you understand, you need to think kind of carefully about one person's advancement can't be a serious detriment of somebody else's rights. And there are two different types of equality journeys. I'm not going into that too much detail for now. Maybe we'll talk about it next week. Now, 142. So it's now promoted just as twerking and attraction to the female's butt, and a desire for anal sex, which affects male to male or male anal sex. 143. But it's not born in them. It's a choice by persuasion by the media, being that the norm in that Adamite and that history, both Greece and Rome, which spread all over Europe, then spread to the West. So predominantly, they won't admit it, but these Greek and Roman are predominantly homosexual societies, and say what they promote in the kind of artistry and iconography you see all over, their culture. 144. These are part of the devil's new laws on the birth control. The rules and regulations on birth control is to promote these forms. Sexual pleasures, and they seek to imprison most Negro men in the West to expose them to these forms of contact. It's planned by the race of devils. 145. All about the butt, then anal sex with both male and female, and this is not about those born male, khatat body, with a vanas tasu, feminine spirit, or those born with a female khatat body with a male spirit, or the hermaphrodites or hermaphrodites. Yeah, so what you're understanding here is that basically, if a person's born that way, and we can get into that next week in a bit more detail. Yeah, because remember, gender is determined up to 6 weeks in the sexual process. There's an issue. Sometimes you can have issues, too much stress within the birthing process, which causes a hormonal imbalance in the person, leading to what we call hormone sexual. And so, as I say, describing what you're seeing here, the male body, female spirit, female chemically. So the female is going to be attracted to what? The external male form. So you then have what they call in same sex. So that arises out of a defect in the birthing process. It doesn't mean evil or negative. That's somebody who's been born with bad eyesight. You understand? It's as simple as that. So if you're born that way, and therefore your attraction is to that, then that's what it is. That's natural. You understand? Defects happen in nature. You have separately to that though hermaphrodites and hermaphrodites who are truly neutral gender beings. Not people saying out their mouth, "Oh, I'm non-binary, I'm non-this, I'm non-that." BS. People who are born, you understand, with a XY, let's say XYX configuration or a double XY configuration. Do you understand? They're born with extra genes, do you understand? Each in their chromosome. And so they have more energy. They vibrate higher than the normal human being. Do you understand? So both genders, understood, in this case, hermaphrodite, but lean more towards the male side. So the male body, but both genders inside. Not both genitalia, that's a defect. Energy, understand? Chromosomal energy of genomic energy of both genders inside, but male, hermaphrodites, both genders lean, both genders but lean more towards the female side or in a female body, both genders within. Now, because of misinformation within society, a person who is hermaphrodite may have different types of feelings. Because of bad information, might become in societies where more fluid, as they describe it as today, or queer, or things of that nature. When in actuality, with proper information, they may not move to that direction, but may do in the same by choice, because they're both inside expressing. But maybe more likely those feelings get interpreted as, when in actuality they're not really the same as a person, for example, who is homosexual. One is a defect in the birthing process. One is naturally occurring but rare. We used to be that and then split off into male and female. So this is what we first were as hermaphrodites and hermaphrodites. Do you understand? Now, why is that important? Well, because this was reflected, yes, on the Dendora star map. Because when you're looking at the star map here, there's a better version of this. Basically, within the four corners, can you see? Yeah, you got, it's a Dendora star map. So the star map showing, or a depiction of the star map, showing the influence of the 12 constellations. I'll put it up to 24 because both have a positive or negative influence. With the cosmic energy from those constellations hitting the planet at different times, changes the nature of the behavior of surface life forms, understand, or people inhabiting the earth. Understood? So, which is referred to as solar biology and lunar biology. So this is the impact that these cosmic entities, you understand, and the energy that we receive from them impacts or has an effect on the biological systems on the planet, but also the other life forms on the planet Earth, depending on the where the axis of the planet is focused on. And it shifts every 2,000 or 100 years, in the same way it's pointing to different star constellations. In the middle, you see the hippopotamus, or a picture of a hippopotamus, which is effectively the human being. Understand? Because human beings who are both mammals and reptilians, understand, which is what we reflected by the deity Ptahhotep, understand? Or let's say Tauret, which is where they get the word Torah from. The first 5 books, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, is named after Tauret, Torah. They're shown as the hippopotamus. They're mammals who are also reptilians. In the 4 corners, you see these 4 women, you understand, holding up the planet. Holding up this star constellation. Because in the temple of Arashta or Isis, yes, is where this Pandora star map is was found. You understand? around the world. Well, in Paris, I think. Yeah, it's where the Temple of Isis, where this came from. You've got 4 seemingly females, yes, holding up the star map. Yeah, and what we were showing you earlier, look, they've got Atlas, yeah, in their thing. Yeah. Now, when you saw us males or females depicted, yeah, we're covered up. Yes, when they want to show their stuff, and showing you the difference in culture. Yep, and they're showing their reward and sundry to be admired by those who like that type of thing. You understand? So when we're depicting like men, for example, it's for a certain reason, because penis is showing it as a delivery device, showing it in a sexual fashion. But as you can see here, this man is holding up the world, correct? Yeah, and then in religion, you've got a hymn saying he's got what? He's got the whole world in his hands. Okay, so but yet we're ignoring this thing that, okay, well, they're holding up the world or worlds, you understand? First depicted in here, you understand? So what's not shown particularly well in that diagram, I forget a different one, is that effectively what you see, it's a bit difficult in this depiction. I probably have to get a different star map, but you've got the 4 in the world, and what you've got in other ones, not showing more clearly in this one, but you've got 4 Horuses, yeah, or males depicted kneeling down. Understand? So in the 4 corners, you've got four seemingly they're women holding up, and then in and around this star map, I'm going to show a different one. In these corners, you've got 4 Horuses kneeling down. You understand? And so so what we end up with is, for each one of these females, yes, holding up this star map, what they're showing is those females are hermaphrodites. Yeah, so they're females, but they have double the gender power of a normal human being. Understand? So it could be a double XY, for example, configuration. Yes, so they have double the power, double the vibrational rate of a normal human being. And then what they show is they show 2 males, yeah, so 2 males in a knelt position with the mask of a Horus, or in this case, an eagle, understand? Yeah, which is Horus, so that's depicted as male. So the power of these 2 males is equal to 1 hermaphrodite female, showing the doubling effect. Yes, understood. Yeah, so there's 8 of them depicted around. Yeah, so 8, and they're shown with their hands up in the air. So 8 of them are depicted. Yeah, 8 of them depicted. Let's just show. In fact, let me. Yeah, we'll leave that for now. I'll do this. But you will look it up yourself. You'll see here, as I say, females holding up, and then 2 knelt down Horuses. Yes, it's showing this 2 for 1. So 2 males equal to the power of 1 hermaphrodite female. Understood? And actually, you see them in the as you saw the women holding up their hands. Everybody, 2 Horuses are holding up their hands as well. And if you count the number of hands, as you go around the sort of Dendora star map, you count the number of hands, it equals 24. Symbol of the 24,000 year, you know, renewal cycle, 24,000 year equinox, in the same where the planet moves between, moves twice in one 24,000 year period, between gold and moon cycles, where the gold cycle it's closer to the sun. Lunar cycle or silver cycle is further away from the sun, and the planet circumference is 24,892. It's varying miles in circumference. So the 24,000, we have 24,000 genomes. So the 24, as you can see in the cycle, is the 24 constellations. Aspect to them. You understand? So this is showing how we viewed, you understand, neutral gender as we would have them beings. You understand? And so, as I say, the power of them in and why, as I say, homophobia then becomes a problem in the black community is because these were revered, these individuals. You understand? Hermaphrodites and hermaphrodites, because they're able to raise their vibrational rate up higher than the normal being, which allows them for our spiritual development to open up certain gateways which are around the planet spiritually. So when you set up the ritual, you need effectively, yeah, you would have 4 hermaphrodites or hermaphrodites within the within a square type scenario, and in the middle you have the golden child. You understand? And so they're able then to say open up these gateways. So they're known as gatekeepers to us, gatekeepers in terms of this configuration. So we look at this diagram, for example. Yes, which is basically showing, excuse me, our relationship to the Orion star constellation and the different gateways that can be opened up by these special females or special hermaphrodites, and so beings, these different configurations as we was expressing to you earlier. X, Y, X, understand? Y, Y, understand? YXY, excuse me, and YXY. So hermaphrodites and hermaphrodite configurations here, you understand, in the 4 corners. So we're replicating the relationship between these. We replicate the relationship between what is able to open up these gateways and their neutral gender situation. So if in the primary colors, for example, which is what? Blue, red, and yellow. Yeah, you see that green is not a naturally occurring color. Green is a combination color, you understand, between the in-between. So in nature creates this sort of triad principles. So you get hot, cold, and then we have warm. You understand? So we have these scenarios in life, you understand, of which you triad principles. You understand? So between these 2 states, the vibration of the northeast and west, but then between northeast, north and east, you've got northeast. So we get a neutral position between those. So hence we got green, if that's yellow and blue. That's correct. And then if that's red, neutral position is orange. So they represent that in the ability to open up these different gateways, overstood, at certain points. So certain points, these gateways get open, like when a person is transitioning, you understand, at the point of death, and they transition, the gateways open up at 3 a.m. symbolically in the morning, and that enables that gate to open, and then beings can travel or cross over from the physical into the spiritual realm, so to speak, and in the other direction also. You understand? So we've got these gateways opening up in certain corners, and there's also a way in which for us to, when things got beyond repair in this planet, these gateways get opened up and allows us to jump from Earth to its twin planet, Razak or Riz. Understand? Which provide us. Understand? So, which Earth's twin planet or its sister planet, but it's twin planet in terms of their creation. So they can jump between the 2 without no need necessarily to. What enables us to travel long distances over a short period of time using these gateways. So here, then we see what? We see a female, a male position. Do you understand? So again, we look at the seasons as we expressed this before. The woman is a balanced position. So we consider these are more of your summer, a spring type scenario season, and this is your what? Autumn, which are neutral. Autumn is not spring. Autumn, is not summer. It's not winter. It's in between. As spring is not summer, it's not winter. It's in between. So neutral positions, and then we've got the male positions here in terms of would be your summer and winter. You understand? It's the extreme positions. Yeah. So, and then the golden child in the context of this would be in the center. You understand? So this is a star map relating to us as supreme beings with souls of how we move, understand? Or when we were not quarantined as we are now, because our mentality is messed up. Where, as I say, white mentality in black skin, you understand, or white influence mentality with black skin, understood? White damaged mentality in black skin, and so our powers have been suppressed and quarantined to this planet, but obviously the goal, or to transform back into supreme being again, is to be able to travel freely to different dimensions, galaxies, other solar systems, planets, so on and so forth, having that ability to travel intergalactically once again, which was a norm for us, you understand, or a norm for our etheric ancestors, and still is. So this configuration or this structure is deeper than, well, I don't like that man's sexual preference or that woman's sexual preference. You understand? Because of the fact that our neutral gender beings get caught up in the ignorance of what pertains to the kind of gender confusion. So that argument is not our argument. You understand? We have a different understanding. If you're born that way, it is what it is. Now, were we sitting there promoting it like, hey, if you're a kid, you can be neutral, you can be gay, you can be lesbian. Do you understand? Were we sitting there doing that? No. And the reason for that's got nothing to do with any phobia or anything. It's got to do with the fact that remember, we're optimizing our society to align ourselves with natural nature. Nature did not provide at least try-way options in that regard. Now, our ancestors or high ancestors, in all honesty, don't care about sex and sexual preferences. They're interested in the soul of the being. Do you understand? But, however, when you're aligning yourself to the rules of natural nature, if I'm two males, for example, and I introduce the need to have a female, you understand? That introduced more risk, you understand? A genetic risk into our union. Doesn't mean we can't have one. We've got to mate with a female. Now we've got a free parent managing situation, but we're not necessarily a free parent actual, you understand? A genetic situation that's happening internally. There's an external factor that's had to come in there. Whereas when you've got a male and a female, it's optimized. The way the rules are, they're optimized for that type of production, as is, I suppose, if you've got two females or whatever, or one female can reproduce another female child without a woman. So the child is not reflecting both parents, are they, in those units, because the way the rules are structured and the way we're just structured physically. Yeah, so it introduces more risk, more issues, you understand, with disease internally, and it's difficult then to maintain a divine bloodline unless you're going to do it just for the purposes of, as I say, of having sex, not in a union type situation. So what I'm saying to you, if it's that, then if that's what you're born as, it is what it is. No judgment. In the sense, it is what it is. You're attracted to, no judgment. But would you promote it as an option? No, because it's going against or going away from the optimized way in which we reproduce. Do you understand? So that's always going to be at the forefront of who we are as human beings until nature decides that three people in a situation is what you need to produce a child, then that's what it's going to be. So you then have to work your rules around what's best to achieve that union. So and not in the way which is done today. I suppose in the case it's done today, they degrade or devalue down the woman because it makes them feel better. So these were like surrogate and things of that nature. When in actuality, you're enlisting the help of a supreme being to produce your child, or the woman's supreme characteristics to produce your child, and then you want to negate her qualities by saying, oh, that's a surrogate because it makes you feel better that it's your child and not really her child. Understand? So these kind of lack the ignorance around that. Anybody who's propagating that type of culture expression, well, I mean, what's that program? Handmaid's Tale. You understand? It's got Handmaid's Tale vibes to it, where you're just reducing the woman down to a womb. You understand? For your selfish benefit because you want to feel like you're the parents and the person who actually produced the child. It's not the parent. In actuality, you're respecting it. You know what I mean? You wouldn't show if you were looking at a picture, for example, it's like I don't know whether you've got a woman who can't have a child, for example, and using a surrogate. Do we show the reality picture or do we show the picture that we want to show? Yeah, so do they show three parents in the situation, or do they show the two parents who have acquired the child? If it's two gay men standing there, do they show the two gay men and then the woman who gave them their child? You understand? So you've got a three-parent situation, or are they just going to show the two men with the child in their hand? You see what I'm saying? So we're not respecting, or two women, vice versa. You understand? Not showing the man if they got a son, for example. So you're not showing respect to alignment of nature's rules, and it creates irreality in some instances, which we're seeing now, cultural irrealities. You understand? So our thing is not based on any kind of hate, but we also have to recognize, as I say, the agenda or the attack or way of, as I say, as it's been expressed there, where homosexuality, lesbian, etc., has been weaponized against our race of people to stop population growth and say mess up the genes. And with the myriad of that, you've got these highly special individuals that are getting caught up in nonsense, not recognizing that they are special individuals. I'm not talking about somebody, as I say, who turns around and says, "Oh, well, I'm a neutral gender being." Understand? No, I'm talking about somebody who in their genes states that they are. As a gatekeeper, or have the potential as a gatekeeper, in our culture in this regard. So that's important for us to, in terms of, we were schooled a certain way. We learnt about mitochondrial DNA in the 90s, you understand, and before, you understand, before that. Yeah, so schooled on genetics and genes, so that when it came now to deal with, for those of us who were raised in religion, some of the anti-gay sentiments within it, which has nothing to do with our culture, it's easy to understand it, you understand, because at the end of the day, there's a lot of things that happen in a bedroom, let's keep it 100, that are never going to result in a child being born. And listen, that's not my preference. That's just not what I'm into. I don't like peanut butter. You understand? Other people do like peanut butter. So, Jennifer, do I hate somebody because I don't like peanut butter? Do I have to translate that hate to people who do like peanut butter? No. You understand? But what we obviously are seeing is it's war against the genders, which is because who's in control of that? In terms of Mohammedans. And if you look at their depiction in the extraterrestrial calendar, you understand they were of all different races, athletic bodies, and saying that kind of neutral gender, being promoting this LGBT, which is about population reduction. You understand? Some feel that there's too many people, over 7 billion human beings, you understand, on the planet, and some people feel that number should be more 500,000. You understand? So this is to do with agendas taking place on the planet. We should say it doesn't mean we need to be conscious of it because that's taking place in the environment. But what does it have to do with our culture and our view and our moral view of these things? You understand? And how that all works is important in terms of reshaping your thinking on this, and then what works best, as I say, how we set up our societies to optimize not only the raising of our children, but what's best for our relationships, but also takes advantage of, shaping us in a way that helps us to become spiritually powerful again, or optimum, do you understand, in terms of what we were created to be. So, very important diagram, and so I'm going to explore that a bit more next week. What we will be doing is going into the Gateways class and exploring next week epigenetics in great detail. So Master there in those pages have touched upon it. We're going to go into it in a bit more detail. So when in readiness for next week, we'll be ready to take some notes, because what I'm going to be interested in when we play the Gateways class, we'll go through it a little bit, is, okay, all the things that you've been taught over these 13 or so classes or whatever, okay, can you pick out what she's talking about or pick up certain concepts? And let me show you how old that Gateways class is and now the sort of TED Talk clips we're going to show and see how those things have translated. So whether blacks on the street or us are paying attention to it because of our Bible ignorance, others around the world or them in Caucasian society, which is what we were always kind of ahead of the game when, as the master teacher's been teaching, we're always ahead of the game and saying they're now teaching their people all the information that you already knew. You understand? So you can keep wrestling and fighting against this individual that's been sent to raise us, or you understand? Yeah, we can be at the bottom and continue to be at the bottom of the pile, being taken advantage of by those who know who we are, but we are ignorant to who we are. You understand? And so the world's cold. It's a cold world. It's a cold game. You understand? Out here. So, you know, we have emotions, but don't rely on others' emotions to help our progression. We're going to have to deal with that for ourselves. So, yeah, so we'll get into epigenetics next week, which is, I suppose, understanding about not only environment affects genes, then generational behaviors, affects genetics, get into that, and then get into finalize next week. It'll be about compatibility, touched upon in the last class, where some people don't understand that some races, in terms of their connection with each other, are incompatible. You understand? That's how, you know, their ancestors would have designed that in. Some people don't realize they're holding black genes and they're black. You understand? They're holding black genes, but they may appear white in society or whatever. But they're holding black genes, and it's affecting their ability to procreate with people who they perceive who are their race. You understand? And they're not having children or whatever, or having difficulty having children, because they don't even realize they've got conflicting genes inside of them. So I've been touching upon that next week in that subject. Any final questions before we close out? Listening today. Any questions before we close out? Okay. All right, no questions. So we're back next Sunday, same time. We'll try and get this one out this week so we can go over some of those details. But as I say, much more interactive thing next week, and I will be running some quizzes and tests next week. So don't run from the quiz, black or other people who are on the call. It's just to test learning and enables in giving the answer. You can give a bit more breakdown in clarity in terms of those subjects. So you have an understanding minimum of the subjects we see taught for you today. Okay, all take care. We will see you next week. And as I say, hope you have a positive week. Same time, we'll catch you for another part of an Outformation class dealing with the proof by way of Nabab and free Dr.York.